my fellow Westorians. Wow, what a big episode after a big time jump. The longest episode of the season, so we got lots to talk about. But as usual, on Monday episodes, we do keep it spoiler-free. Heck, if we were to include spoilers, well, we wouldn't have enough time anyway, so it's kind of a good line to draw in the sand anyway. We do talk spoilers on Saturdays at 3. Last week we had Dr. Kavita Finn, and that was a fantastic discussion. Y'all should check it out, even if you don't normally watch the preview episodes, and even if you're hearing this afterwards, because it was so good that it doesn't matter that we were talking about the episode that already happened after it, or that came after it, rather. All right, make sure as well to watch our synopsis videos before each live stream. This one was a little bit longer than usual because there's more going on, more to say, more to talk about. That's becoming increasingly more common with the show, and that's obviously a good thing. The more we have to talk about, the more it implies the show is giving us things to think about. Thanks to Jeff Gnarly the Long Snapper, History of Westeros' First Sword, and Dragon Lord Eric the Evening Shade, Lord of the Groves and Defender of Stygi, Rider of Ixodes Scapularis the Bloodthirsty, a dragon with purple scales and wings, with a red underside, black horns, and green eyes, art by Cheese and Pencils. That's Ed Shear. Sean, do you have a special beverage today in honor of a special animal?
The Pink Dread. This is Watermelon Bang, Watermelon Mountain Dew, and the Protein Berry Naked Drink, and it's delicious.
I think that's dreadful, which, hey, it works both ways, huh? Our 3x3, we like to start with that for our coverage of House of the Dragon and our spoilers. We encourage you to drop your own favorites, highlight performance, highlight plot, scene, and highlight dragon moment in the comments yourself. If you have such takes, go ahead and let people know. Last week, in our Facebook group, as usual, we have a poll for standout performer. People are allowed to vote for more than one character, more than one actor, rather. And that allows people to, pick, not have to narrow it down so harshly and only pick one out of so many great performances. Emily Carey took it down last week with 41% of the vote. Fabian Frankel got in there at second with 14%. Patty Considine, 10%, very solid. Yeah, it's kind of odd to think about how Emily Carey's just not there anymore. Which leads us to our new performers. I'm going to start right off and say Emma Darcy. Their birth scene was amazing. They did an amazing job with that, and I think that was intentional, not only to bookend what Rhaenyra had seen and experienced with her mother, Emma, but also just to show immediately what an amazing actor this is, because that's a difficult thing to portray, I'm sure. So yeah, also shout out to Matthew Needham, Larry Strong, really chilling poetry of and murder there and plotting. I gotta hand it to him there. That was very good as well.
I think it's worth pointing out that birth scene also showed what Alicent has gone through and what many women around the world have gone through. It's a tough experience, and maybe something that a lot of times it focuses on men in battle. You know what I mean? A lot of times that's what we're shown or empathizing with, but there's women have something that they even kind of jabbed at that. I was like, I took a lance in your arm. She's like, okay, good job.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That was a part of that. Yeah, that was really good dialogue there. Well, Sean, go ahead with yours.
I'm really torn. I want to give credit to the kids. I think if I'm really pinned down, I'm debating between Olivia Cook and the actor that played Aegon, which
Ty Tennant, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, David Tennant's son. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that he did a decent job, kind of like Jack Gleason did, or just kind of being a little punk. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But not being too over the top and not being quite as one dimensional either. Like we saw him have a little moment of shame. Like I think it's kind of bold for an actor to bare his ass,
yeah,
introduce himself to the world like that, and
right, awkward.
But when he got chastised a little bit, like a range of emotions went through him in that moment, and he also seemed to. I couldn't quite tell how much was him or the stuntmen or whatever, but did a little fight scene, and overall, I don't know, I was impressed. I thought that the kids as a whole, I'm kind of focusing on him, but I think that the strong kids did a decent job of having a a different mentality, and Amond, kind of went through it. Anyway, I'm happy with all the new actors coming onto the show, and if I'm pinned down, I think I'm going to pick Titan.
Cool. Great call. I'm glad you highlighted them, and we'll have plenty more to say about those characters and as well as the actors throughout the episode.
Michelle, what about you? I did really like all the new kids, so I'm glad you highlighted them, but I'll have to give my shout out to Nana Blondell, who played adult Lena, as well as I also really did like Emma Darcy, their performance as Rhaenyra. It's mighty big shoes to fill. So for both, I think those would be my two.
Cool. Right on. Highlight plots / scene. Some of my choices would actually be spoilery. There's some of them, they did some really clever foreshadowing, some more straightforward foreshadowing. There's just a lot of foreshadowing in this episode. So we'll talk about more of that on Saturday, obviously. But I just love that library shot in Pentos. To keep it simple, just that image of all those books. And then you get zoomed in shots where you can see some of the titles. And it just... I wish I had those books. Shea, what about you?
Well, it's surprise. I picked Lena as a highlight for me, and the Lena scenes were also some of my favorites. But my favorite scenes probably were the Aegon masturbating in the window and Alicent coming in scene, in addition to Alicent with Helena and Aemon. So really just the scenes with Alicent and her kids were maybe my real highlight
Nice.
of the episode, because we'll get into it a little bit more, but I love a little weirdo. I really like it. I like all three of Alicent's little weirdos, and she's got another kid that's in Old Town that it maybe is a little more normal. We'll see.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. They may have sent away the one normal of the four.
Is that something that I should know? Is that
They
something that
didn't
happens
mention
They
it
have
at
not
all.
mentioned it. They have
Okay.
not
Yeah.
mentioned it.
But we have pretty much confirmed that the character does exist and will be introduced later. So we'll talk more about that later as well. Sean, what about you?
I really have a tough time this episode. There was a lot. I think I have more notes on this episode than any so far. So, ask me tomorrow or next week and I'll probably say something different.
Mhm.
But I think I'm going to say the scene when Lionel comes to resign and Viserys won't let him. And Alicent is kind of part of that too. It's not only that scene, but sort of the follow-up, because she kind of presses. She's like, yes, what is the reason?
Give me a clear explanation.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
And when she walks out, when she leaves, she kind of pauses in a hallway, kind of, I don't know, wondering if she pressed too hard, kind of realizing, the turmoil that's pending, how much control she really has or should have. I even wonder if maybe she's kind of pushed too hard I wonder if she's regretting some things, like because she also just turned down the olive branch from Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
And she seems to have more agency than in the past, but some of it is at the expense of Viserys, right?
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
like, this meeting's over, you're tired, honey, let me fluff your pillow. Like, she inserts herself into things, and maybe is going to make an enemy of herself, or I'm not sure, but the fact that I'm thinking so much about it, there's almost every scene.
It's like she's
does
very
that, but
pressed, I think. It's like she hasn't relaxed this
Yeah.
entire 10-year period. She's been frustrated, paranoid, annoyed, angry for the entire decade. And, well, that's going to take a toll, maybe. Shay, what?
I question, by the way, how good a job she's done of preparing Aegon to rule. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe he's well studied and a good fighter, but I don't know if
she
she's
hasn't
doing the best
convinced
job.
him he needs to yet, but yeah.
Yeah.
Shay, what about you?
What do
We're on highlight plot scene.
I gave mine.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. I went backwards. Highlight dragon moment for me. I'm going to say Vhagar at night. It was just so heartbreaking, but also so epic. The dragon is just so majestic, despite being so ancient. And her slow coming around to what was being asked of her. And you got the sense that she didn't want to do it, but she still obeyed. And
I liked the caption in that scene where it says Vhagar wailing.
Wailing, yeah. And yeah, that's part of what makes it so heartbreaking. And it illuminates a little more of the concept of the bond between rider and dragon, because we've seen that consistently especially with the command Dracarys, they seem to have more information than just the command would tell them. They seem to know what the target is just about every time. And that implies a little bit of minor mind meld of types, understanding a minor bond, maybe a little supernatural element. And I thought that was highlighted super well, as well as just being beautifully shot. O'Shea?
Yes. I would say my favorite dragon moment was the most mythical, exotic dragon of them all. The pink dread.
The pig dread.
The pig dread. Yes. No, I really liked the scene a lot in general. Like, I know that it was objectively like a pretty cruel prank for these boys to play, considering this is such an important thing within their house to them as people. It was more extreme than just like showing up him a pig. Like, that was a very cutting thing to do, but it was also a very high concept prank. It wasn't just like pushing a little boy around. Like, they came, like the Velaryon boys and Aegon came together and like decorated a pig.
They planned on what they were going to say.
Planned what they were going to say. Like, I appreciated it a lot. It was a sweet moment despite the cruelty, and it was cruel, but it was also very funny.
Yeah, Aemon apparently does not have a sense of humor.
No, because it's kind of funny, but like, I get that. For him in particular, for Aemon, this is a very cutting thing to do. It's like hitting his sore spot. And it's more extreme than just the pig, but still, like, I'm sure they've also just been bullying him beyond that one moment. Like, this is the climax, the culmination of probably years of them picking on him.
Yeah, probably. I wonder, did y'all think this is maybe a nod to the book Pig Riding? From Tyrion and Joffrey, Joffrey trying to make Tyrion ride.
For me, I thought of Clayton Suggs. I thought of the pig with wings sigil. So that's what I thought of.
That's a good one. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Sean, what was your highlight dragon moment?
I just do want to say real quick on the pig thing that many times I try to remind myself watching these shows or stories that you can't always expect 10-year-olds to behave appropriately. It might have been cruel, but I don't think that they fully understood how cruel they were being. That, they did it because it was funny. I don't think they are necessarily cruel boys. They did it unintentionally. Like, they know they're being mean, but I'm trying to be a little forgiving.
Well, yeah, they don't fully understand the consequences. I think, which is
exactly,
I think one of the like ominous themes here is these are boys who don't understand the consequences of their actions like most children don't, yet they have dragons.
Yes,
and royal titles and all this other stuff. Yeah, it's like
I also want to point out it's sort of a parallel. There's a lot of parallels in this episode of all sorts, but to the Baela?
Yeah.
What's
Baela and Rhaena are the two twins, yeah.
And Baela doesn't have her own dragon.
No, Rhaena doesn't. Rhaena has the egg.
Okay,
Baela
sorry.
Baela does.
Baela has a dragon.
Okay. But it's just, we're kind of seeing that from a couple different angles of, what it's like when you're expected to have one and don't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's two of them there. Exactly. It's just neat kind of mirroring there. Connor Cunningham, Super Chat, says, who rode Vhagar before Lena? Was it Visenya? It was Balon. It was the father of Viserys and Daemon who rode.
Which is a fun concept, because think about the idea that that's Daemon's father. So Daemon probably rode Vhagar like with his father or something as a young boy, perhaps, or either way spent close time with Vhagar, and then his future wife ends up bonding with Vhagar.
Yeah, because Daemon was more like his father than Viserys was.
So Vhagar is very much tied to Daemon's side of the family.
Yeah.
By the way, that's my highlight moment was Vhagar, and specifically, I appreciated that they seemed to get character out of the dragon. I don't know how to say it exactly, but it was clear that. Also, I need to ask this question: are dragons boys or girls, or both, or neither?
That is exactly right. They are both neither boys and girls. But in the case of Vhagar, she is a she-dragon. They call her the queen of all dragons in House of the Dragon. That isn't really a term in Fire and Blood or anything, but that is what they've been referring to her as in House of the Dragon. So yeah, she is a she-dragon. You can use that. But I tend to use non-binary they pronouns for most dragons because we don't know. But sometimes we do know, like Melis, the Red Queen, or another one that like Cyrax, who hatched a clutch of eggs. You usually use she. But anyways, you can use they or she or he.
Yeah, it's like in real nature that they can change sex sometimes based on certain circumstances, based on like what else is around them, environmental stuff. And Septon Barth, we have an episode on him, discusses that at length. He this theory is considered ridiculous to some in world, but given we know it exists in the real world, we think Septon Barth is probably right, and there's other evidence for it too. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
I wonder if that makes us pay attention to other stuff Septon Barth says, if he's got that figured out.
We have a Septon Barth is always right kind of motto, generally.
Okay.
That's kind of a thing, yeah.
Anyway, I like that Vhagar, they were able to demonstrate emotion from her. She seemed reluctant, disappointed. Maybe she even knows pain and loss, and I felt like there's a certain wisdom with Vhagar, and even in other scenes you could see that she's, I don't know what word I want to use, tattered a little bit, worn, old, still powerful, huge, fast, everything, but maybe vulnerable in ways. I don't know. Anyway, I was very intrigued by that. Maybe my favorite dragon scene of all of the whole Game of Thrones world. Everything we've seen on screen of dragons, that might have been my favorite one. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, look at that thing. Jeez. So look at the scratches, like the wounds, and the age. It's so well done. Yeah.
Just the blinking of the eyes. I just want to give so much credit to what they could get out of that moment there. Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about some themes and patterns that help us set up our discussions for the rest of the episode. Children, of course, are a big part of the episode. But not just the existence of children, but the circumstances around their existence and the denial of those circumstances, obviously parentage being the main thing there. And, of course, Laris's chilling speech about children being a weakness and all that, and the philosophy that he's espousing there. The death by fire, both foreshadowed and literal. We got Lena, Harwin, and Lionel literally dying to fire, and a goat. And I think careful what you wish for is a major one this time. There's a number of people that want something but get a different version of it, and it's not at all a good version of the thing they wanted. We'll be pulling that up frequently here as we move through different topics.
I wonder if those two kids that want dragons might get them, and it's not what they thought it was going to be down the road. I'm not sure.
Entirely possible.
I can imagine.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but I've thought that a lot about the original Game of Thrones story, how all the Stark kids all had this idea of something they wanted. They all kind of got it, and it was not what they really wanted.
You're totally right. That's a great call. I didn't think to connect it to the Stark children, but yeah, I do remember you talking about that before, and I that was a really good point. So 10 years. The choice to jump straight into Rhaenyra's birth of Joffrey is strong. Pun intended, of course. It connects Joffrey to Joffrey. We go from Joffrey Lonmouth to Joffrey Velaryon. It's a neat way to connect those two moments that are so far apart. A way to keep the audience sort of connected despite such a huge amount of time passing. In this first scene, 3 of the 4 new adult actors are shown right away, too. So 2 of them right away, and then Alicent not long after. So you get to see them together and show off their acting skills really quickly as well. Shows how far the relationship between Rhaenyra and Alicent has fallen as well. You immediately, what was pretty clearly happening is now confirmed to have happened. She's demanding, bring the child to me right away, and then she's pretending like she didn't really ask for that, or was asking for someone else to bring the kid, etc. And Kristen Cole's in the scene, too. Even get him thrown in just to have that moment of awkwardness, which I feel like that's what got Laenor thinking about Joffrey. I mean, surely he thinks of Joffrey often anyway, but that may have been why he pushed for the name kind of awkwardly there, like aggressively, without talking to Rhaenyra about it.
I wondered, by the way, if that was to demonstrate to us that Kriston is now guarding Alicent and not Rhaenyra.
I think that, too. Yeah, I think it effectively, I think it was very efficient.
Ostensibly, Rhaenyra has her own man now to take care of her, right?
Yeah.
So they don't need to have a guard around her all the time. And obviously there's all sorts of other reasons why there might be rifts or shifting of alignments or whatever. But
I would guess she still would have a Kingsguard assigned to her. It's just not Kristen. But I'm sure that one of the Kingsguard is still Rhaenyra's Kingsguard.
Yeah, and we
even with her married to Laenor.
And we saw him there. It was either Eric or Arik behind them on the steps. So there was a Kingsguard with her. He just didn't say anything. Eric and Arik are twins, so it's pretty hard to tell which is which.
This is another thing I've thought a lot too, and I don't want to spend too much time on it right now, but just the idea that the nature of the Kingsguard would shift so much in different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, sometimes they might just be babysitters.
Yeah.
And when in moments like this, when there are like 6 or whatever kids to keep track of versus no kids to keep track of, sometimes the king might have all 5 or 6 of the Kingsguard just around him all the time. Sometimes when do they sleep? They've got to be like assistants and sub guards and night shifts or something. But anyway, I'm sure there's a lot of interesting logistics would come into play around all that.
Yeah. And what did you make of the trail of blood? I mean, obviously it's shows how tough Rhaenyra is, what she's dealing with. But also it's pretty symbolic. I mean, it kind of references the intro sequence, all the blood in the hallways and everything, and Kristen Cole standing right there. But ultimately it leads to Queen Alicent. So yeah, there's blood between them for sure.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, like she's leaving a trail of blood behind her. I was wondering if that was foreshadowing of something that might come. Or there was a lot. There was a lot in that moment.
And so there's this line from Alicent: "Do keep trying, Sir Laenor. Sooner or late, you may get one who looks like you." That is straight from Fire and Blood. So we're happy that line was included, even though it's a pretty mean thing to say, but it also gets to the point very efficiently. Like, yeah, she's mad, and I kind of understand why she's mad. I don't agree with how she reacts to it, but she had to do her duty. She had to sleep with her leprosy-infested husband, and these two, who aren't gross, can't even like, he's obviously not into her because he's gay, but like they can't get it together to just do their duty. Like, I can understand why she's mad about that. Again, don't condone how she reacts to it, but the actual being mad over that, I get that.
Yeah, and I have to say, a lot of people are giving Alicent a hard time for, I mean, her line to Laenor was very mean, but are giving her a hard time for Rhaenyra choosing to go walk up these stairs. But I just have to say, Alicent didn't ask for that. Alicent asked to see the baby, thinking the baby would be brought to her, not that Rhaenyra would get up and come.
Yeah,
and in fact, when Alicent sees Rhaenyra there, Alicent is genuinely very concerned for her and conscientious and wants to get her a cushion. And Rhaenyra is just steely-eyed about it. Again, Rhaenyra clearly thought this was the right move or whatever. I don't know, but Alicent didn't ask for this, so I really think people are giving Alicent too hard of a time for this moment that Alicent did not make happen. Actually.
Yeah, there's plenty of other things to criticize her for. And she also seemed genuinely like happy to see the child. Like, that was like a real genuine look of oh, this, you know, she was not Laenor, but the baby, when she held the baby herself, that was a genuine like, I know I'm a mother and this is a baby and I like that. You know, that was very just kind of wholesome split second there.
I generally agree with you that I don't think she wanted or expected Rhaenyra to actually come like that. But also, it's still pretty messed up the moment the baby is born to be taken from the mother's arms and carted off somewhere else. So, like, that's still a pretty messed up thing to ask. I couldn't help but wonder exactly what were the instructions. What if Rhaenyra didn't go for 5-10 minutes, an hour? Like, are guards going to come and grab her and care what? I think she could have waited. I think she wanted to make a statement as much as Alicent did.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think for sure. And you're right that it was extreme for Alicent to ask to see the baby right then. But again, the thing might have, the message that she gave might have been like, as soon as the baby's born, I want to see. Like, she might not have been very specific to whoever passed that along.
It was a power move. I think it fits with the theme of care for what you wish for. It was a power move that went awry for both of them.
Yeah.
Like, she didn't expect Rhaenyra to have to walk up the stairs, but she also didn't expect, you know, or she did expect the kid to be brought to her, but not under these circumstances. So, yeah, it didn't go well.
I also wondered if the reason Alicent wanted to see the baby, now she still doesn't need to see immediately, but she wanted to see, does it look like Laenor?
Yeah.
Is this another strong kid? Great, you know. And that might be another reason Rhaenyra wanted to go, because she might have wanted to be in a room to keep that type of talk to a minimum. Right?
You know? She whispered that to Laenor. She didn't say it out loud. So I think that's a good point. To the room. For sure, yeah.
I wondered a little bit, Rhaenyra, if she was suspicious of the baby's safety, you know, like, I'm not letting this baby out of my sight.
She looked a little anxious about it, I think, maybe.
Yeah. I don't know if Alicent's gonna like murder the baby.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
But she's a new mother. Like, she's stressed out. Just went to prep birth, you know.
Which Alicent has given birth 4 times over now, so Alicent knows how Rhaenyra should be feeling right now. I have to think that there's a chance that maybe Alicent did not feel such a pang for her own children, and so she can't relate to Rhaenyra's level of caring, perhaps. Like, there is a little bit of a distance between Alicent and her children compared to Rhaenyra and hers, I think.
Yeah. So Laenor comes across as decent but spoiled, and he's not fully bought into the fatherhood thing. Like he does his part, as he says, but he's not great at it because it's hard to fake being a father. Like you can't fake something so complicated and consuming with no experience at it, right? It's not like he's also someone else's father and can just pretend these kids are also his. But he has no experience in child rearing at all. So
he also doesn't seem to have much interest in it, to be fair.
True.
Right?
He doesn't seem to have a lot of interest in it. You're right. I would agree. And he does have a new lover that clearly takes up a lot of his time. Rhaenyra points out he's like buying fancy horses, drinking great wine. Yeah, he's not the most serious person, but again, not a bad guy either. Like he's decent. That's what I think that's a solid enough aspect there, at least from what we've seen so far. We haven't seen the end of him. Meanwhile, the opposite, Harwin, seems like he would be a great father, or at least comes across pretty well in a lot of ways, but he's got a much harder job. It's one thing to pretend to be a father. Just pretending not to be a father, that sounds way harder.
And he's not doing a very good job of that either. He's about as subtle as Joffrey Longmont. Right? Like,
yeah.
When like the kid is picking up on it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was. I feel like they're not even trying to hide it.
It's a hard thing to fake for all parties involved. I mean, and I think it's one of the things that is in denial. People are in denial about. That's why it's such a major theme of the episode is people either accept this thing that they're in denial about, they're just like going along with it, even though they know it's complete nonsense. But there's several people who really don't understand just how obvious it is. They're in denial about how much everybody else knows, and they are disabused of that notion in this episode very thoroughly.
I want to convey a thought I had about this scenario, and because it might play into almost everything we talk about. I feel like Alicent, part of what upsets Alicent is she's like, to her, this seems so obviously wrong, and everyone knows, and no one's doing anything about it. And maybe it's a little bit worse too, because she's worried about like a threat on her kids. And like, look, I'm not like, if Rhaenyra's not even going to follow the rules, if those kids aren't even truly born to the ostensible husband, like I'm not going to this is not going to put my kids' lives in danger. This is not going to put my position and my family in danger if they're not even playing the game. Right.
Yeah.
So I could see this extra layer of frustration with her. But I feel like Viserys and some of Alicent's frustration is with him for not acknowledging it. But I feel like in his mind, he's like, look, I know what's going on. I'm not stupid, but just be cool with it. If I can be cool with it, you can be cool with it.
Yeah.
You can see what's happening and you expect me to also. You're right. I can see what's happening. I can be cool with what's happening, and you can too.
Otherwise, it's civil war.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
exactly right. You don't realize what's going to happen if this does become known. So let's just accept it and not make a big deal out of it, and everyone could just be happy, or we can have a civil war. And I it seems like maybe he's being ignorant to it, but I don't think he is. He's just trying to keep peace. And if Alicent could play the game he's playing, there would just be peace. She wouldn't have to worry about her kids. But that's still a little naive thought too, because think about the scene he sees play out in the courtyard. Even if he and Alicent and Rhaenyra and everyone, quote unquote, pretty much everyone goes along with this, everyone isn't going to go along with it. There's going to be a Kristen Cole. There's going to be a Harwin. There's going to be some hothead, some mistake, some person who realizes it in a wrong moment, in a wrong place, and it's going to blow up. And maybe it's just inevitable. I'm kind of guessing that scene in the courtyard is foreshadowing.
That was, maybe that, and as well, it was the inevitable. Of course, it's partly triggered by Alicent asking for something out loud that she didn't understand the consequences of, which turns out to be one of the biggest ironies of the episode. She says to Kristen, after he admonishes himself for calling Rhaenyra the C word there, and he's like, okay, that was beneath me. I shouldn't have said that word. And she's like, we have to be about honor and justice and and all that. And then decency, exactly. And then, so, in a vacuum, all right, yeah, let's be about honor and justice and decency. Sure, that sounds good. But she ends up, by the end of the episode, she's accidentally gotten her wish from Larry Strong, the most evil thing we've seen, basically. And this is what she wished for, was honor and justice and decency, and that's what she gets instead. And Kristen Cole, meanwhile, goes off and goads Harwin into revealing the secret that they were all just keeping under wraps because he thought that's what she wanted as well. So it's like, yeah.
Also ironic that after she, pleads to Kriston for honor and decency, she walks in on her son.
That is literally what Alicent does.
You should be king.
Well, no, a couple of things there. One is, she says that you should be king right after she sees him not just masturbating, but masturbating standing in a window. Like, I think that is not to be ignored.
Yeah.
Looking out over everyone. But before she talks to Larys and says, "Oh, I wouldn't be so blind. I wouldn't be blind like Viserys. I see my kids as they are." But blah blah. Like, no, you definitely are blind to your children.
Yeah.
You really, really don't.
Even Viserys, when they bring up the prank, right? Viserys goes, "Are you sure our Aegon wasn't the ringleader of this?" And Alicent's like, "Well, I don't know."
And then she confronts him, and then she believes him. What kind of? How do you believe that? Like, how do you just take him? It was the younger kids that did it.
Aegon literally calls Aemond a twat during that,
Which gets her. Which, to be fair, that's the thing that upsets her more. She's like, "No, it doesn't." She's like, "Well, it doesn't even really matter who started it. The point is, you should be defending your brother. You guys are supposed to be a team." Yeah. Which that much I'm like, okay, that I agree with her on that. But yeah, the denial does creep into everyone's children here, and lots of different people's views of these children. Yeah, I mean, compare Aegon on high like that above everyone, and consider that he could be king, and compared to like Bran, who's we saw looking down from the towers in his second chapter ever, and how that's a metaphor for him being king eventually and being a green seer and looking down on everyone. But he's happy with it. He's looking down and looking at all the different people and looking at all the different jobs they're doing and thinking about how it works together. He sort of seems a bit worthy of it, at least in that sense, or at least not someone who would make it about himself. Whereas, what is Aegon doing? Just, this is what I think of you all. This is what I get out of this. He's looking up. He's not even looking down. So, anyway. Let's move on. The small council scene is pretty interesting as well. There's been a lot of changes. We get to see some new members. Let's talk about that first. Set the stage. Alicent, of course, is there. Rhaenyra, and she's got her father's little quorum ball, mouse ball, dragon ball thing. Rhaenyra is there in her capacity as heir, apparently, which makes a lot of sense. Viserys is there, of course. Lionel, of course, he's there, but won't be anymore. So presumably we're getting Otto coming back if she gets her wishes there. Tyland is still master of ships. We now have Jasper Wilde as master of laws. In Fire and Blood, his nickname is Ironrod. I don't know if that's his nickname in this as well, but it probably is. Probably.
It says it is on the guide.
Oh, it does? Okay, cool. So Ironrod, he has like one line, and it's to denigrate Daemon. So that right there tells you something. Did you catch that, Sean? Did you notice that? Or was that kind of hard to tell? Because I don't know. If you don't have subtitles on, I'm not sure if you know that it's even him speaking.
I usually do watch with subtitles, but there are a few times when it's hard to keep up with, especially new characters. Like, I don't know their names. Yeah,
well, what's interesting is House Wild is in the Narrow Sea area. They're on the lower portion of the Blackwater Bay area near Massey's Hook. So possibly
they're the ones named after
Zach
Wild and Ozzy Osbourne guitarist,
That's
right?
Right. Yeah, the spiral and everything, spiral sigil and everything. Yeah. So we also have Lyman Beesbury still in there as Master of Coin. There's an implication that he's slowing down a bit. That's quickly delivered there. Orwyle seems to have replaced Melos, which I think we're supposed to assume is why Viserys is still alive. Not necessarily because Melos was poisoning him, but because he isn't as good a healer as Orwyle. Maybe he was poisoning him. I'm not saying he wasn't or was for sure, but the change in Maester is certainly a factor in why Viserys is not only alive, but seems to be doing a little better. Like, he's not doing badly. You know, he didn't have any fainting or bloody noses this time.
Considering how we left him and 10 years have passed, even if he's doing the same, it's pretty good to be doing the same after 10 years, given where he was at before. So
yeah.
I was hoping for some line of dialogue about that Maester change. What happened to the old one, or why did he just die and this guy took over, or did he get fired, or was there some?
I assume he died. That is what happens in Fire and Blood. The guy was old and he passed.
Okay.
So that's what we're kind of assuming here. That's a pretty safe assumption, but we'll keep an eye out for other information.
It was a little suspicious to me too that Beesbury guy was still there. If he's like, I don't know how much of that was supposed to be him like losing mental capacity or just not focused in the moment. But if he's losing mental capacity, Lionel Strong seems to be doing a good job as a hand. He should speak up,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe it's just more of
maybe he's distracted. Maybe he's generally a good hand, but at this moment he's distracted.
And it might be new that Lyman is slipping. This might be like the first 5 times that he slipped up like this, and so that's coming. You know what I mean? But he does have other things on his mind right now. But it's possible that Lyman hasn't been like this for 5 years or something, but for 6 months.
He also might delegate well. Like maybe Lyman has a good staff and things are still running smoothly or whatever.
Yeah,
he might still be pretty good.
That's what I'm picking. That's my head. Yeah. Things are going fine, but he has good people surrounding him.
There's still no Master Whisperers, but Alicent has clearly been using Larys for that. More on that later. That's a whole topic by itself. We don't need.
There's no named Master Whisperers.
Right. Yeah, there is one, but he's not on the council. That's a good way to put it. Now, there's a very interesting change in Rhaenyra's character. I think this is meant to show maturity. Rhaenyra's take on the Bracken Blackwood situation. What did you think of that, Sean? Like, she thinks that they should intervene, maybe based on what she saw happen with their duel in front of her so long ago.
Well, also that she and Alicent are there in a council meeting. I was really happy about that.
Yeah.
That they were like present in part. They'd spoke and were listened to, or mostly at least. It seemed like when Rhaenyra wasn't listened to, it was Alicent's fault. But I was really happy to see that they were being involved in the decision making process, or in the room where it happens. To quote Hamilton.
So that was cool, and she even had a plan. She was like, "Well, we should be able to find out where those boundary stones were by talking to locals." So that's insightful. I think that just shows competence. So that was kind of the point. So she's matured, she's more competent, but also Alicent was kind of like annoyed by it, and didn't. I think Rhaenyra came out looking better in that moment for sure. But the next moment when they talk about the stepstones, it's a little less clear though. It's definitely getting important again. It's mentioned here. And in Pentos, by the Prince of Pentos, and by Laenor talking to Rhaenyra through via Carl Corey, his new lover. This is where it isn't as clear, all right? They argue about whether they should have defended it, built watchtowers and all that. I'm not sure that Rhaenyra is right in this case. Alicent says they can't afford it. I don't know whether that's true or not. I don't know it seems like they could maybe have prioritized it. But so I tend to think Rhaenyra is probably right, but I definitely, I haven't seen the numbers, What do you think, Sean?
Yeah. they probably haven't seen the numbers either. I wonder sometimes how they calculate some of these decisions.
Yeah.
Not even just like in, I don't know, ancient or medieval times, even just like 50 years ago. I don't know how people made business decisions without computers.
I don't know how the U.S. economy works. But then again, if Carl Corey's getting bags of sapphires off pirates, maybe they should look into getting There's some money there,
Yeah.
So anyway, the marriage offer is, of course, a very huge moment here. Jace to Helena, it does make a ton of sense. Like you said, this is careful what you wish for. In her efforts to not to expose Rhaenyra's children, she's refusing what should be a really great compromise. Just like you said, Viserys is like, I can get over it. Why can't you? Yeah, this is such an obviously great step towards peace that she just abjectly refuses. She's just completely not into it. And she says, over my dead body. I mean, it's sad. It's like, damn.
I really was, I guess I should have known better, right?
Yeah.
It was like too easy. It was too good to be true that Rhaenyra was offering this olive branch. And then it did seem like such a good plan. And Viserys was like, yes, that's a great idea. And Alicent was like, no, I don't think so. Look, this meeting's over. It didn't occur to me until just right before our stream here. I watched it 3 times, and it wasn't until the 3rd time when it clicked in my brain. It's like, she doesn't want her son to marry a bastard. Or her daughter.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's just an extra layer I wasn't considering. There's like maybe some stubbornness, some frustration, some I don't know, headbutting. She doesn't want to give in or give her credit. All these things. But on top of that, it wouldn't be legitimate. She's worried about how that might play out when it's already an issue. It wouldn't matter if she just accepted it as it was. I wonder if Viserys, again, we have a much different story. But what if he's like, yep, they're bastards, but it doesn't matter. I legitimize them. I use my power as king, and they're legitimate. Like, I wonder how that would go over, I guess just because he says Rhaenyra is a queen, they don't expect that to go over. So
yeah. So yeah, you're good takes there, Sean. It also, one of the other things I think makes it so tragic is the thing imparted to her by her father was Rhaenyra is going to kill your kids, but why would that happen if they're married? So like, she just doesn't, either she doesn't see that, or she just hates this idea of bastardy so much. And this is one of the things I think is very unappealing about Alicent's stance, and something that's going to make a lot of people feel differently about her if they didn't already have an opinion based on Fire and Blood or what have you, which is that this is a recurring theme throughout A Song of Ice and Fire. Is it rules or right? Like, were Aerys' Kingsguard right to keep their oaths, even though he was just evil guy that was just brutally murdering and doing evil deeds? Like, is their oath really that much more important? Corrin Halfhand would say no. Your honor is coin to be spent for the realm. Your honor is a personal thing. You can't hold that above like people's lives and true justice. And I think that's something a lot of us will agree with. Alicent is holding this societal prejudice against bastards. She's putting it way too high on the priority list against preventing civil war and things like that. It should be way more important, but so she's sticking to the rules at the cost of decency and peace.
Torn loyalties and vows to multiple people, right? That was a constant thing. Like the Kingsguard, they're supposed to defend the king, but also the queen and a prince and a princess, right? So like sometimes you might have to choose, and we even had a bit where I forgot who it was now, but they're like, if Joffrey says bring me his horse, okay, just bring him his horse. If Joffrey says slaughter all the horses, come talk to me first.
Yeah, great.
So that's kind of like part of the modern American military is you don't blindly follow all the orders. You are supposed to, there's, among other things, there's like a commander's intent. Are we following that? There's you learn about the Geneva Code and different things like that are more fundamental than an order that a superior is giving you. Although sometimes you don't have the time or wherewithal to consider all that in the heat of the moment or in the heat of the battle. But that's not quite where we're at right now, right? Like, it seems like a council meeting is a great place to figure this type of thing out, right?
Yeah.
And if not in the council meeting, maybe in private with a couple members of the council meeting. But one quick thought I had about Alicent, I wonder if part of what's going on with her is that sometimes when you have something that you want and you get something different than you expected, even if it's better, you're still disappointed with it. Does that make sense?
What you wish for.
And I wonder if on some level that's what's going on with Alicent. She wants things to go down a certain way, and she's kind of got a plan or a vision.
Yeah.
And even when something better is offered to her, she just can't see that. She still is on this one track.
She wants Rhaenyra's children outed. She doesn't want them killed. She certainly doesn't want her kids to marry them. She wants them disinherited. If the truth was exposed about them, they probably wouldn't be killed. They would just be disinherited.
I mean, maybe
Harwin would be killed.
Harwin would be killed, but no, I mean, I don't think Alicent or anyone can really be confident on how those boys would be treated. Everyone is acting as if they would be killed, and I think that is not a paranoid idea.
I think I agree. I think a good example of maybe what Alicent wants is maybe not entirely realistic. It may be too risky to get that exact precise outcome that she wants. And I think that's what Sean is saying here, is that she's too hung up on a very precise outcome rather than a good outcome.
And it's like literally what Alicent is saying to Aegon, that he's blind, and that he's like, no, like what you don't understand is you're the threat. You're the challenge. It's like those boys are the threat. There's no world in which they can just be disinherited. Their very existence is a threat to her children if they're ruling. If she thinks that her children are a threat, then then she should be able to understand that Rhaenyra has to feel the same thing.
Yeah. She's not able to look at her situation in a mirror there. You're totally right, I think. Yeah, she only sees it for herself.
Put him on the Kingsguard real quick.
It's that whole denial about your own kids, and you can't see your children as other people's children, things like that. Yeah, that's a great take. So Larys takes her even more literally, of course, as we saw. The plant is all over her chambers now. That's a really strong symbolism there. That same plant.
Pun intended.
Strong,
for
yes,
strong.
of course, always pun intended. Yeah. So that same plant he introduced her to is just all over
flower.
her chambers. Yeah.
For what it's worth.
What's that?
The hibiscus.
Yeah,
flower.
it's a hibiscus. Yeah, he calls it like the Malau. Some other in-world name.
But it's like a type of hibiscus type flower. They have them all over Hawaii. It's the state flower.
Yeah. So not only is the plant all over her chambers, the hibiscus, but so is he. He seems to be he could just be in there now. He just has dinner with her. They chill regularly. And this is just showing he's sort of a symbol of one, or at least one large example of compromising your values due to perceived threats. This is what power does to people. You being close to the center of power puts you at risk from all the other people who are close to the center of power who are chewed up by that engine. And you have to compromise your own values to stay alive, or you believe you do. So yeah, when it's a very common theme when supreme power or death are two apparent outcomes. I mean, Cersei said it best. When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There's no middle ground. So that's just kind of what's driving a lot of people's actions here. Yeah, look, as we've said with Aegon, perfect example that Ashea just explained. And it's very karmic that Otto passed down this paranoia to Alicent, which she is in turn passing on to Aegon. And it's intense, right? She grabs him and yells at him and is like, how stupid are you for not seeing this? And she's like, you didn't see it at your age. I mean,
yeah, I know. And her father dealt with her a lot more delicately than she dealt with her son right there.
Yeah, Otto is a little more composed.
Although she followed the rules a little better than her son is.
Yeah,
that's true too. Yeah,
she listened to her father. She read the books. Etc.
That's true. That is true.
That's a good point. Yeah. So let's talk about the children a bit more. Yeah, just kind of explain them all a bit more and lay out some of these characters and what we learned. We have Jace, whose dragon is Vermax. He's the one who seems to have figured out who his real father is. So that's interesting and very sad. It's heartrending to see what we talk about how tough it was for the father and a little bit for the mother, but it's
toughest
way harder to understand how hard it is for him. Like, this is something I find harder to fathom. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean,
because he's a child. Like,
I think for me, what gets me is that he has to feel so mixed up about the shame of it all. Like, it's not just like, oh, who's my real father? Is it a shameful thing for this man to be my father? But like, this guy Harwin has been really nice to him and a good father figure, so I imagine he feels like he shouldn't feel such resentment towards him, but I would guess Jace does feel that resentment.
Yeah, you're right. Very conflicted, which is a really amazing thing to be able to do, is to lay out extreme conflict for an 8-year-old and to make it pretty clear. Like, that's really powerful. Like, yeah, is he supposed to hate his father for cheating on the princess or cheating on the husband or whatever? Or is he supposed to hate himself for being a bastard? He's taught that bastards are bad, especially royal bastards. Like, they're the cause of civil wars and all this strife. Is he going to loathe himself or blame himself? Or
he might feel resentment towards Laenor.
Yeah.
How could you let this other man, or even like, who are you to tell? You're not my real dad. You can't tell me where to go. You know,
And then we have little Luke, who's even younger, trying to deal with all this, and we don't know what his read on it is. But yeah, Harwin is around a good bit playing with them, so you have to think that it might be on Luke's radar too, even though he's a couple years younger.
Now, and Joffrey almost has it easier. He never meets his father, his true father, which almost makes it better. Like, that's, from my own perspective, that's how it works. I never really met my father, but I had half siblings that came from a different mother, and they all resented him when he left them because they were old enough to remember it. So I'm like, well, I probably would have resented him more if I was old enough to remember him leaving, but I was 6 months old. So I feel like this gives me some perspective on what it's going to be like for Joffrey. It's hard to miss someone as thoroughly when you never actually knew them, right? He can miss the idea of having a father or his true father and all that, but it's just an idea. It's not. He doesn't have anything to form that idea around. No real person to imagine.
Yeah, and Rhaenyra doesn't really address this with Jace. Like, I don't know if this will be a conversation that'll come up again, or this is just kind of the end of it between them. But do we think she should have come clean, or do you think she needs to leave him with not like?
I think she probably should explain it now. I mean, I think she was in denial about them figuring it out. It was one of the many levels of denial that she had, was she'd never considered he would figure it out, not at this age anyway, because she seemed like legitimately like, what do I do? When he brought it up, she was looking to see if Luke could hear.
Yeah.
And then she's like, you're a Targaryen. That's all that matters. She was like, she just had to think of something like diplomatic to diffuse the situation for now. And then, but I do think she has to explain it more later. But I don't know that she will. I don't know if she will. She may be kind of handling like her father, just willful denial. That's the party line. They never deviate from that.
Yeah, well, certainly, even with Harwin gone, the allegations aren't just going to disappear. So we should still get Jace's reaction to his strong heritage, or whether he. I would be very curious actually to see those kids interact with Laurie Strong because they have to realize at some point like, oh, that's my father's brother, that's my uncle. Like would they make that connection in their brain at all? I wonder.
But now they're going to be raised at Dragonstone instead. That's a
good point. They won't
happen
see
now.
Him around.
I mean, they may think of him, but they won't have contact with him. And other dragons will be raised at Dragonstone as well, which is also significant because the Dragon Pit and Dragonstone are different. Dragons supposedly get bigger if they're raised on Dragonstone. Of course, that requires a bit of time to pass, but we do have a little more time to pass, but not huge amounts, probably.
Yeah, for what it's worth, we will get another time jump. So these children that we're seeing are not the actors that we'll have for the length of the show.
Yeah.
They are going to age up again. So don't get too attached to any of them.
Yeah, Aegon's dragon is mentioned to be Sunfire, by the way, if y'all didn't know. And what were you going to say, Sean?
I fully appreciate the challenges of making this show. Like they've got a lot of material to give out. They're going through some time jumps. They've got to switch actors. Audiences kind of want to see some dragon action. They don't want this to stretch out for 10 years because it's hard to keep everyone together. And, the lessons learned from Game of Thrones and such. But all that said, they're going through a lot really fast, and I would love to have gotten an episode through Jace's eyes.
Yeah,
that would be really neat to see a little more drama play out, a little bit more. Because like Harwin, they seem to present him like he was a good guy, but I don't really know. He only had like 7 total lines of dialogue. I'm not sure.
Can I say,
how
Sean?
Much,
I really liked you brought up the idea, the concept of seeing this through Jace's eyes, which is really interesting to me because they've referred to this 6th episode as kind of a second pilot. And how they have to introduce all these other characters. And in the first pilot, it's very much through Rhaenyra, through Millie's eyes. And so the idea of focusing even more on the second generation is not where I would have chosen to go with it. I agree with them focusing in on Emma as Rhaenyra and on Rhaenyra. But if this was a 12-episode season, then they could have time to do something like that. And I do think that it's a gamble either way for them, whether they do these time jumps or whether they take their time, whether it's too slow or too fast. Like, it's a gamble on what audience they're going to resonate with. They went with the one they thought was a surer thing. And as it turns out, this is a huge hit, and they maybe could have taken their time with these characters, but they didn't know that for sure.
Yeah.
But I do think that a middle ground would have been just a 12-episode season where you have a little bit more time, because I think that the Velaryon Strong Boys and the Lena and Daemon and Pentos plotline needed a little bit of breathing room. I do, and I do think audiences have felt that like pretty unanimously among people who really love the season are still like, it could be a little slower right here. Right here.
It does seem that. I've seen that a lot too. Yeah. It's obviously there's mostly just high praise for the show, but yeah, that is probably the biggest recurring criticism. Like, I wish it was a little more spaced out.
When your nitpick is, I wish there were more episodes,
it's a good
the
nitpick.
Show's good.
You're killing it
exactly.
when people will just say, I wish there was more. I mean, it's basically what they're saying. We want more. Yeah. So yeah, you're totally right. That is the best criticism. So Helena also, we haven't really talked about her much yet. She's into bugs, and there's hints she's a dreamer, which is another quirk of Viserys. Is obsessed with dreamers and the idea of dream, but he hasn't noticed that his grandchild has this trait, apparently, because he would probably spend time with her.
I know you would think Viserys and Helena would be spending time together. You're right, and it seems like they generally would have other things in common besides the dreams, with her like interest in a hobby of looking at bugs and his model interest. Like, they both what yes, Sean.
What's making you guys say she's a dreamer?
Okay.
Not that I disagree, but what's the...
Okay, there's 3 things she says. The first one is just being predictive. She says, oh, he did it again. When Aemon comes in, she knows that he was going after a dragon. That's just understanding her brother. So that's nothing.
It's a good guess.
By itself, that's just a guess. The next thing she says is he'll have to close his eye first when she's talking about getting a dragon. That's
He has to open his eye.
No, close.
close.
But but also an eye.
An eye, yes.
You have to close an eye first.
Just one eye,
yes.
which I thought was interesting.
Which is a long-standing metaphor for losing an eye to get power. That's like the Odin,
like
Blood
Odin.
Raven,
Yeah.
Other examples,
Mhm.
okay? Third...
Oh, yeah. By the way, I just want to say real quick, Helena is Viserys' daughter, not grandchild. We said grandchild.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There.
Whoops. Yeah, I didn't mean to say
It's
that. Yeah, so
definitely
it's
his daughter.
even...
It's just that he looks so ancient and decrepit that we
How could you make that mistake?
I know. How
Yeah.
could we make that mistake? But absolutely. It's even more...
it's even more egregious that he has to spend more time with her.
Yes, the third thing that Helena says.
The third thing that Helena says is about the millipede and says the last ring has no legs at all. So if you think about that as a dreamer, it sounds like she's talking about the last green dreamer, which is Bran, who had no legs. Metaphorically speaking, he lost his legs.
Okay.
There's other ways that applies that I can't say.
Yeah.
It may foreshadow other things. So some of it requires knowing what's coming, but I think that alone, if you really focus on it, it's like, well, these are very prophetic, sort of patch-facey kind of things to just be saying at random.
Yeah,
and she's
I
into
definitely
bugs,
took note of that
yeah.
scene. I went back and watched it, I don't know, 3 times. And somewhere in my notes, I wrote down what she said.
Yeah.
I was trying to make sense of him. I didn't make the connection to maybe she was seeing Bran in the future. And
now she has the dragon dream.
I knew there had to be more to that.
She also has the dragon dream fire, which
That's
is
she
maybe doesn't have dream fire yet. It's unclear. Probably doesn't actually, because that was the dragon Aemon was going for. But we're pretty sure she's going to have Dreamfire off screen, claim her off screen anyway. So it's probably going to be ambiguous.
Okay, I'll just get into this real quick. In the book, yes, Helena has Dreamfire. On the HBO House of the Dragon Guide site, they say that Helena has Dreamfire. I have a feeling that was them updating it's just someone who updated it, and it was meant to be updated after episode 7. Yeah. Is my theory, because Helena is not at the dragon training scene at the dragon pit. Yeah. Why would she not be at dragon training if she herself has a dragon already?
Especially if she has a
Maybe
big
she already
dragon.
trained her dragon.
Yeah, but he's giving Aegon.
He's better at it.
He's giving Aegon as like, oh, you need to have mastery over it, like Aegon does, as if Aegon already does have mastery over Sunfire, and Aegon is older and would have had Sunfire earlier. So the fact that Aegon is at the dragon training and Helena isn't points to me to the idea that Helena's about to tame her dragon.
That makes sense, but also maybe Aegon was there because he wanted to be part of this prank. He was also yawning, like, I've been here, done that. Yeah.
He did seem bored up until that point.
That is a good point, that maybe they don't all always go to dragon training classes or something like that. It is true, and a good cover for that. The other thing is, however, that Aemond clearly was trying to do something with this dragon that it appears to be Dreamfire. Why would he try to tame or claim the dragon of his sister, or if it was
literally just told that you can't do that, in that scene. Yeah.
So that's what points to the idea that Dreamfire isn't actually claimed fully yet, but that it is not changed and will happen anyway. So
super tiny spoiler either way. So so we're good on that. And it's also important to note that Aegon has a few other troubling behaviors that we may have noted that are maybe hard to spot. They're so quick. His extreme anger during the training scene, even when he has the upper hand, when he's just grabbed, he reacts really like, you can't touch me, it's very like, that's a red flag. And the way he looks at the serving girls when they're passing by, he kind of tries to flirt with them, which is like, ooh, that's troubling too. That's not good. Especially paired with his...
Not just that he does that, but they know to, don't make eye contact.
Yeah,
they know he's trouble, yeah.
And so let's move on to Daemon and Lena's children, briefly. We've got Baela, who has Moondancer. Baela's named for Viserys and Daemon's father, Baelon, the one we were talking about that rode Vhagar before. And it seems that from the conversations that Baela has more in common with Daemon. Rhaena's like, oh, Dad kind of ignores me. It seems like, and we do get that from Fire and Blood. Not that Daemon favors one of the daughters, but that they are pretty different. Ultimately, their personalities diverge a bit or a lot, even though they. So don't be fooled by how similar they look.
Yeah, and it's funny because Bela is named for Daemon's father, and Rhaena is named for Rhaenys, Lena's mother. So it really, the line was drawn at their birth, as it were. But yeah, like you see that Daemon is having like Valyrian lessons with Bela, but not with Rhaena. And so I assume that's related to the fact that Bela has to also be training her dragon and has to be learning how to speak Valyrian to train her dragon. And so that's why they're spending a little more time together naturally is because of that. And it isn't maybe is meant to be personal, but obviously Rhaena takes it as such.
Yeah, so there's a lot of mirroring in these scenes with the training of the dragons and talking about eggs and hatching and riding.
And Lena brings up how, like, I want my daughters to be raised with their birthright and with their family and all that. Like, they should be here at the dragon pit training with the dragon keepers and with all the other kids.
And she tells Rhaena something that maybe Aemond could have used the advice on, which is like, hey, I didn't get Vhagar till I was 15. So, a lot of dragon riders don't get their dragon till later. Not everyone gets a hatchling. What's neat, though, is that Rhaena shares the name with the princess who started the egg in cradle tradition. Rhaena, older sister to the old King Jaehaerys and good Queen Alysanne. So that was her. She's the one who started that tradition. So that's kind of fun that we have a young Rhaena trying to hatch an egg. And she says that very childlike, like, are they going to kick me out because I don't have a dragon? Of course no. Of course not. They're not going to kick the kid out. Do you think your parents would just say, oh, yeah, we're kicking you out? No, I think they're going to keep their kid with them. But it's very endearing. And this scene is beautiful. Look at that fireplace with the egg and everything. This looks awesome.
Yeah, it also makes me think of Dany and Viserys going through, I mean, it's even in Illyrio's Pentoshi Manse. Nice. And just the idea of how unsure Dany must have felt during a lot of her childhood about whether the people hosting her really wanted her there or what she owed them, or just it's a very confusing thing for any child to be in, and that's true for Rhaena too here. I think I think Lena's right that they would be better served at home and not in Pentos. Although, yeah. I guess if they just took the manse and just lived there, like they could build a nice life there. Actually, I think, I think if Daemon, like, Lena has a really good line where she says that Daemon isn't actually interested in Pentos and going out at all. Like you might think, he
complains about the wine.
Yeah, he's not actually enjoying himself there.
Yeah, Lena seems to be right when she says, you're not fooling me here. Like, you don't really, you say you want to be here, but
she's sort of right. Like, I don't know, for the first time I'm trying to be on Daemon's side. I feel like he has some ambition in him that he has realized causes trouble. And I'll just stay out of trouble. Let me just get away from all that, and I won't cause any trouble. And he might still pine for home, but at least he's not getting in trouble here, which now if he gets in trouble, it also involves his children and his wife. And his wife is like, I don't mind getting in trouble. I want to be a warrior. And he's like,
are you sure about that?
Once again, I feel like it would have been, if we had gotten an episode through Jace's eyes, I would like to see it cut back and forth with an episode maybe through Daemon's eyes as a father. It would be neat, a new perspective from him that I can still let my imagination go with it right now. But even as the episode ends, it was hard for me to read. No big surprise. What's Daemon going to do now? Right. I never really know the answer to that question. But the way it ended, I could imagine him, because I feel like I don't know enough about what's going on with their family. I can imagine him being like, I'm out of here, jumping on his dragon and just leaving his daughters behind. I can also imagine him staying there and trying to be a dad to his daughters. I can also imagine him scooping his daughters up and going to Dragonstone. I have a hard time predicting what he's going to do, but I feel like it's less because he's unpredictable than because I didn't get enough of what's going on in his life.
What do you want him to do, Sean?
Yeah, what do you want him to do?
Stay there and raise his daughters. Okay. Stay there, just be a dad and raise his daughters.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I see where you're coming from. Like, she recognizes that he doesn't want to stay there, but he's decided to. What he's done is he's decided to do that in spite of what he wants, and he won't admit what he really wants, because that would lead him towards
him and his family towards things.
Yeah, it would break his willpower. Like, he's trying to assert that he belongs. Like, yes, I desire to go blood and battle and fire and blood, but I also understand the consequences and should stay here. Yeah, so I think you're right. I think you broke that down really well. Let's take a little mid-roll break here. Take a few questions from y'all. Get right back to it. I want to shout out some of our extra cool patrons here while we're at it. First of all, our Ironborn captain patrons: Black Matos Stormrider, captain of the Rusted Hinge; Lord Chucklaws, captain of the Droman Nightblood, destroyer of evil; John Gregor, captain of the Fist of the Drowned God; Sir Kiron of Lonely Light, scourge of the Sunset Sea, captain of Naga's Breath, a Droman armed with siphons of wildfire; Aileen, Archer Queen, captain of the Border Collie; Crimson Kate, captain of the Drowned Queen's Vengeance; Jasana the Just, collector of tolls, captain of the Golden Gift; Beneath the Gold, a podcast focusing on lesser-known A Song of Ice and Fire characters; Prakash the Protector, Lord of the Gallifreyans, captain of the TARDIS of the Seven Seas; Tempest of House Brewer, captain of the Summer Storm; Catherine the Cruel, captain of the Kraken's Claw; Lana Del Rey, Death Dreamer, captain of the Cyclopean Call; Nadia Storm, mother of worms and wyverns, captain of the Stygian Darkness; and Hara Dark Charm, known as Lady Bad Luck, captain of the Black Cat and Prowler of the Seas. Gotta have ships like that with the Stepstones becoming a problem again. People like that.
Can I add in Gregor the Toasty of the Bread Fort? That's my favorite ever.
Always shout out Gregor whenever possible, yes. It's amazing how names like Gregor and Breadfort, because it's Dreadfort and Gregor are like two of the like worst associations, but he's made them nice and friendly and delicious with a little tweak. Yeah, so also want to shout out our... where did we go here? My queens of love and beauty. From the depths of Fleabottom, Lord Ken of House Hammer is declared for Queen Carrie, Fire of the North, Rue-covered Dark Sister from Beyond the Wall, and a laurel of glory in the name of love to Bud of House Beresford, Knight of Tolkien and Arbiter of Scotch from Sandy the Dragon, Blood of Queen Daenerys, and Lady of Jameson, as well as our Blood Riders, Koa Koe, called Sunpiercer, wielder of a dragonbone bow, Cabo the Tamer, wielder of the Wildfire Whip Gehenna, and screenwriter Catherine Van Pelt, wielder of a Valyrian Steel Quill, slayer of unoriginal screenplays. Yeah. Eddard, shout out to Eddard, the model stonemason there. I hope y'all caught that when Viserys dismissed his little model helper. His name was Eddard, so got to shout out all Eddards, right? A couple of fun mentions were thrown out at us. The Century of Blood, Aegon the Conqueror, Aegon's attacking the Lysine fleet, which we discussed in some episodes of Valar Aretas world-building stuff. Another rat appeared on Viserys' mantle. It's like, geez, they're just doing the rats all over the place. It's just constant rats every episode. I don't think I have anything new to add to my rat analysis. I don't know if you all do. Jump in.
I don't have anything to add about the rats, but I want to shout out that in our Saturday episode, we theorized with Kavita the idea that maybe Viserys has Emma's ring and is wearing it. And as you see here, we got that really moving moment where he is just sad and look cold with the ring, as you see on the screen. So
that's pretty cool. That was a great
I wondered
prediction.
if that had to do.
Yeah.
I wonder if that had to do with Helena's comment about the last ring has no legs, and then they showed him
interesting
when that ring on. I couldn't figure out what it meant.
Okay,
so
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. So you were thinking it prophetically too, even when yeah. So as well, and by the way, she's not explicitly a dreamer in Fire and Blood. Let me make that clear. This was a total surprise to us, so this is all new. So
she's not explicitly a dreamer in Fire and Blood, but she is bonded to Dreamfire. So and she does have a. Her daughter Jaehaera is kind of coded as being very neurodivergent and off and strange, and so the idea that Jaehaera, that Helena's eventual, the idea that Helena eventually has a daughter who is a little off too, it's not completely not rooted in to the text, like they there's no personality for Helena, but when you look at what we have, that's not such a great not such a huge jumping off point.
I wouldn't think all the people who were dreamers would have made it into the history books as such anyway. I don't think the Maesters would have caught all that. Like a lot of that would have been kept under wraps or just never been clarified or understood.
Or realized.
Yeah, you're right. Or realized.
Or realized.
By the way, two things. One, we can go round and round on the rat problem. Two, thinking about Daemon, that was another thought that I don't expect that this is what they're doing, but I couldn't help but think about it a little bit. It's pointed out that he's not sleeping and he is drinking. And it reminds me of Daeron from
Interesting.
A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I wonder if Daemon is having some sort of dragon dreams that are disturbing him. That might also be why he wants to stay away.
That's a great point, because he specifically talks about a few hours of oblivion. This is what the strong Westerosi strongline
yeah.
does for him, which does imply that he wants to just not feel anything, and maybe it's because of what's in his mind, because it doesn't seem to have any physical pain that's bothering
people
him.
dying or whatever.
Interesting call, Sean. I like that. That's a good catch.
Well, while we were still back on Helena for a moment, I did not bring up how symbolic the conversation between Helena and Alicent was for their relationship as well.
What do you mean?
That Helena is talking about this millipede and how the millipede has no eyes, and why can't they see? And well, some things are beyond the human understanding, whatever.
Yeah.
Well, there's two things there. One, Alicent just doesn't understand her daughter.
Okay.
Like, so Alicent herself, as she's like listening to Helena say that, Alicent is like, oh, some things are just beyond us. Like, you'll never understand my daughter. You know, like that's, I think, a very relatable thing for a lot of like parent-child relationships. That like gap, that to bridge that gap just seems impossible. Like they are just this mysterious creature to you. But also, there's in this theme of the episode of people being blind to seeing things in front of them, and how can they be so blind? How can Viserys be so blind to his children? How can Alicent be blind to her children? I just don't understand.
I took that as her not understanding her husband, because if I remember right, Helena says it has eyes but can't see.
Yeah,
and I took that to be Viserys.
Yes.
Like
nice.
Why doesn't he see it? Yeah,
exactly.
And Alicent can't understand it, and the answer is that he does see it, but he doesn't want war, and she's the one that doesn't see the potential of war coming from this.
Yeah. So, question from Illegal Xenomorph says, or not a question, but a comment. They kind of swapped out Rhaenyra and Lena's relationship. They had maybe a bisexual relationship implied in the books for Daemon and this waiter guy. It's like as Daemon kind of grabs the waiter a little bit, and kind of looks like
like you see, he like grabs his arm, like
this guy's licking his lips a bit.
I don't know. Like
does it look like Dave Grohl? It really looks like Dave Grohl.
Like I'm sure there's not much there, but I noticed it, and 1,000 other people noticed it too, because I tweeted and they were like, "Yes, bisexual Damon and bisexual Bob." No, I don't know.
But I also think they just did that with Rhaenyra and Alicent as well. They put those sapphic vibes that you discussed before. So I think they did give Rhaenyra that aspect. They didn't give it to Lane.
And I want to say, I know a lot of people are sad that we haven't gotten Rhaenyra and Lena's relationship, their friendship, or more than friendship. There is room for us to headcanon that as having happened. Daemon and Lena, we don't know how long they've been overseas in Essos. If these daughters are 8, then like Rhaenyra was married to Laenor for 2 years before Daemon and Lena had a child even. And like there is plenty of room for there to be multiple years of close friendship. Yeah, we didn't see it on screen, and that matters to a lot of people. But for me, it also matters whether I can know whether it happened off screen. Does that make sense to you?
It does, because also like we have Daemon seems to know about Rhaenyra's children. He jokes is like, the entirely coincidental resemblance to the commander of the City Watch. Like he knows what the kids look like even. So like either he's definitely informed if he hasn't been there. Like that's very specific. So I think you're right. There's room for that.
Yeah, my headcanon is that Daemon was there for the first birth, the first baby. Like they hadn't left at that point. That they were still there. They got married. Like they didn't just get married overseas.
Maybe they were just on Driftmark or something. But which means they could easily come back and forth on their dragons and all that.
Something that didn't occur to me till just now, but Daemon might also be more welcome with the rest of his family while he's a stable husband and father.
Absolutely.
Right? In fact, that's another reason maybe not to disrupt the way things are now.
Specifically happens in Fire and Blood, Sean. You're right. Actually, that's a great call, because specifically Viserys says, "Oh, he'll have changed now. He's a father." That's a specific line in there. So that was great. Stannis Baratheon says, "Do you think that the Lord Caswell cameo is foreshadowing that he's for the Blacks?" Oh yeah, definitely. He says, "If there's anything I can do for you, that's
that
a guy who's
saying
come. I'm your friend."
That totally. Is Alan Caswell. We did get a first name from the HBO guide site.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Alan, that's right. And he's not given a first name in Fire and Blood, so this is a little bonus name there A good call there, Stannis. Callista Cross says Emma and Olivia better be nominated for Emmys. Both were fantastic. Well, if I had a vote, they'd have my vote. So I don't have a vote though, but I pretty much.
You can't count any Emmys for anything.
Yeah,
Better Call Saul didn't win a single Emmy.
I know, that's so funny.
Emmys are meh. Yeah. Vegarian says no. Cyrax is disappointing. We haven't seen nearly enough of her as of yet. Yeah, I mean, the reality of the show, even though it has a big budget, is that they cannot lightly include those dragons. Like even even like 30 seconds of dragon is a lot for them to do. It's sad but true.
I wanted so badly just to see Rhaenyra and Lena riding their dragons together. It would have solved people who wanted to see more of Cyrax. It would have solved people who wanted to see a little more of Lena, people who wanted more of Rhaenyra and Lena. Like if we had just seen, I think if we had seen the time during the 10-year gap, that's what we could have seen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Brandolin Price says, do you think next season the time jumps will slow down? Yes, there shouldn't be any more time jumps at all next season. If you've watched The Witcher, it's a lot like that, where they had a lot of time jumps in season 1 and then they just stopped doing time jumps altogether. That's what we're getting here as well.
Yeah, so we will have one more major time jump this season, and then that should literally be the end of it for time jumps for the Dance of the Dragons era. But again, if the show House of the Dragon might, after 3-4 seasons of Dance of the Dragons, they might go and do Aegon's Conquest or a different era in Targaryen history. That's what they've brought up. The idea that they can do it under this framework. So we might get even larger time jumps eventually, seasons from now, but not in the next couple seasons.
So let's see. All right, let's talk about briefly the training yard. Yeah, so Viserys is hopefully optimistic here, hopelessly optimistic here. He says, this is the stuff, like the kids getting along, they'll grow up together and be friends. And it's like, oh boy, that is careful what you wish for, brother.
And it's funny because last week on Saturday, we were talking about like, how are they going to cultivate a friendship, right, between these boys, and it seems like they're just dropping the ball. And it's like, well, no, Viserys is trying. Like, he isn't unaware of that. He isn't completely not cognizant of the fact that, like, they need to forge bonds between these children. Yeah. He's not doing a great job, but he's trying.
And Alicent is completely undermining him. Alicent is specifically telling them not to be. She's like, don't be friends with them. That's basically what she said in that scene with her son. She's like, you think they're going to be your friends when they ascend the throne and you're a threat to them?
To be fair, she used the word plaything. So it's a little bit different. Maybe she's warning him to be careful of their relationship. Not necessarily to not be friends, though. Maybe to not be friends, but maybe to be friendly. More worried about like.
Well, she says specifically to him that out in the world, you and Aemon need to, be together, which implies out in the world, like, is with the Velaryon boys. They are not family to you. Otherwise, that they would be under the umbrella of it's fine if you pick on your brother with family. Like, so she is very clearly delineating to him, no, they are not real family. You can't behave with Aemond like with them like you would if you were just alone with your family.
Yeah.
I've got like 3 things I want to say real quick. 2 of them are flashback things. I forgot to pay attention to it this episode, but last episode I noticed that Alicent's fingers were still raw.
Mm-hmm.
Forgot to look for it in this episode, so
I don't did notice. I think we got a few maybe semi close-ups of her hands. It's a good call. I don't know.
2, I wanted to point out back in the Dragon Pit. I appreciate that handler, the guy that seemed to be sort of in charge there, was scarred and maybe burned. Like
and they only speak High Valyrian. That's so neat. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's like a serious job, and that guy maybe commands some respect. He knows the dangers that he's trying to teach them about.
Yeah, that guy was older. Yeah, he seems like he had been around. Yeah.
Finally, more closer to what we're talking about here. When Viserys is making the observation about the boys in a training yard, I appreciate that and wonder about Lionel's comment. It was very tactful when he's like, "That is the hope."
Yeah, that is the hope. Yeah.
But I wonder how much of it was him aware that there was this conflict between these boys, or potentially was, and was trying to be tactful to the king, or if he knew there was conflict among his own sons. I wonder if there was some falling out between Larys and Harwin. They seem to be getting along okay in the past, in the wedding scene. But
they don't have any one-on-one
I
scenes,
wonder,
so yeah, it's hard to.
Yeah,
I don't think they. I kind of imagine they don't get along great because it doesn't seem like they have similar personalities. Because like he talks about how his father is just like so ridiculously honorable with his millstone around his neck, whereas Laris is like completely free of the constraints of of empathy and honor. So
yeah,
I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was really interesting that the HBO site says that Harwin is fiercely protective of his younger brother, so it makes it seem like that's a one-sided thing.
It might be. It might be that that Larry didn't appreciate that. Maybe thought it has made him look weak or something. I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to say. The guy's just pretty amoral, so it's hard to understand where that comes from.
Her fingers look okay.
Her fingers look kind of normal there, I guess.
Fine. Not a great shot of it, but I was on finger watch. If you saw me opening a bunch of pictures of Allison, and I was like, oh, you can't see her hands there either. But they look fine.
It's amazing how this training yard scene, I think, is going to come back to be like, it's already the catalyst for almost everything else that happens in the episode as far as the fracturing of the family. It leads to them going to Dragonstone. Rhaenyra is disabused of her notion that the level of denial people are in, that how much they're participating in this charade. And she starts to fear for her children's lives, not unlike how Alicent fears for her children's lives. For different reasons, but for similar consequences and under the same auspices. So, and meanwhile, Kristen Cole does this because, as I said, he thinks that's what Alicent wants. He thinks it's serving truth and justice and honor, even though it's probably gonna lead to much worse outcomes. He goads Harwin into what we would call an unwise assault. Very premeditated on Kristen Cole's part, and should have held back. Obviously, Harwin should have held back. He shouldn't have done that. He should have known better. Lionel tells him like how bad it was. Harwin doesn't seem to. He's either being willfully stubborn about it. Maybe he's in his own form of denial. There's a lot of that in this episode, obviously. And Lionel's like, dude, people have eyes. Like, you cannot really think that it's not obvious. You have to be more circumspect in this. In fact, it's too late. You have really crossed a line here, and it's incredible that you don't see it.
I also thought Harwin had a great line in that conversation that I wanted to highlight earlier, which was when Harwin says, well, you have your honor and I have mine, which really comes down to the difference between Rhaenyra and Alicent to me, and how Rhaenyra hasn't really thought that she was being dishonorable here, and a lot of what people are doing they think is in fact the honorable way to play their hand, but it is in fact not honorable, or at least is if it's not dishonorable, it's not honorable. You know?
Yeah. And beyond honor, it's dangerous for the realm. It's dangerous for the people that they're ostensibly responsible for.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that they're overlooking a lot. I thought it was an interesting parallel, the Harwin and Kriston versus Kriston and Joffrey.
Yeah.
Right? The idea that Joffrey said something that triggered Kriston, whether it was justified or not. He got on top, started punching him in the face. So now Kriston says something that triggers Harwin, and whether it should or not, he jumped on top, started punching his face.
Yep.
And Kriston seemed to not be defending himself because I think he wanted this scene to happen.
He did. Yeah.
And so it might have changed in a different scenario. But if someone didn't pull Harwin off, he would have killed him the same way. You smash someone on the ground, prone in the face, you will kill them. And I think that Harwin is as guilty as Kriston was. Whatever bad thoughts people had about Kriston when he did that to Joffrey, I feel like you should have similar thoughts about Harwin doing that to Kriston now.
It's unlikely their motivations are similar, but I agree that the need for restraint was very similar.
I might be giving Kriston too much credit, but I feel like he at least believed Joffrey was making a tacit threat, and that's what at least part of what triggered him. Whereas Kriston is making a tacit threat to Harwin, and he responds to it.
Well, right? This is a much bigger. Yeah, I guess it's a similar threat. You're threatening to expose a relationship that would be high treason.
Expose a secret, something that could get people killed, something that would ruin honor and interactions and the respect of the throne, et cetera, et cetera. It's all.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Fair. Kristen did say something that a lot of people would be like, well, you have to respond. He besmirched your honor by saying that. So the natural response is to like deny that. But I think most other people would say, well, that just makes it seem like he was right.
Now,
exactly, which is what Kristan was counting on.
We have a whole other side topic that was too big to include, considering we have so much else to talk about. But in a couple of days from this recording, I wrote a video for In Deep Geek on how Criston Cole escaped punishment and laying all that out and why there's no consequences for his actions. So rather than discuss that now, check that video out later. It should be a little conciser than what we could manage right now, given how many other things we have to cover. All right. Viserys giving some Doran Martell vibes there, watching the kids at play while in ill health and hoping for a better future, while also mentioning Corin Martell earlier in the episode. Now, if you don't trust a Martell, you won't be disappointed or something like that.
Yeah.
That was funny.
I was very excited to hear a Martell reference because maybe we'll get some Martells eventually.
Yeah. So we got a brief... go ahead, Sean.
It just reminds me of another parallel I picked up on. Rhaenyra and Cersei are sort of, Cersei maybe was a little safer in her assumption that no one knew about her and Jaime, but naive to think no one's ever going to find out about it, right?
Yeah, because they're continuing it and they were not as hidden about it, and but the look was a lot more believable. Like they all looked like Lannisters. These kids don't look like either of their parents, so it's a lot more obvious from a visibility standpoint.
Especially when we now have 3 sets of Valyrian Targaryen couples with kids.
Yes, 3 sets.
And 2 of those 3s had the kids are looking appropriately, and one of them, like, they don't even have blonde or
nothing.
Brown hair. Like, not even all shred. 3 of the kids, like,
the seed is strong.
Viserys is trying to I had this one black horse and this white horse.
Yeah. I liked Alicent's response. Like, how did you know? Did you see the horses do it?
And Viserys just
he's like,
off. He's like,
all right, listen to me. I know what you're saying. This is what Sean, you were talking about earlier. He said when she finally presses him, he's like,
I'm trying to give you plausible deniability.
Will you please just get it? Like I'm not actually as dumb as you think I am.
And that is, I do think that we all agree that Viserys knows. He just knows that this would be disastrous if it comes out.
Yeah, it's too late to do anything about it.
It's too late. Like, what is her solution here? Because again, we bring up the idea like, disinherit them. That is not an actual solution that works long term.
Yeah, it's Larry says it really well. He levels with her. He's like, what do you think? The king is just gonna expose his own grandchildren? Like, of course he's not going to do that. Like, you got to think this through from his perspective, which I think is a consistent theme here. Alicent doesn't think things through from other people's perspective. She's maybe not good at putting herself in other people's shoes. She's very good at
Alicent's not the only one guilty of that.
Yeah, at least she used to be good at that too. Like she was pretty good at building bridges between the family early on when they were fractured. But this older Alicent has other priorities.
Maybe want to give Rhaenyra credit for shifting. Now, she was bad at that. Now she's good at it.
That's true.
However, she made it tougher than ever. She's the one that she's the political headache.
Yeah. If she had been a little more circumspect with her children.
Although, you have to wonder that if once Rhaenyra had one dark-haired firstborn son, if she was, whether she thought it consciously or not, if she then does her duty and has a silver-haired kid with Laenor, well, then that leaves her firstborn open to infighting potentially. I don't know that she would thought of it that consciously, but she might be like, well, I'm in for, a little bit, so I might as well go all the way. It doesn't matter if I have multiple if I do this multiple times. And also, realistically speaking, she might have been gambling like, maybe one of my kids with Harwin will have silver hair and it won't be a problem. And she didn't
or if they're girls, doesn't really, people won't care as much either,
Yeah.
So, which is, if the second one or third one is, they would care. If the first one is, they would really freak out if it was a brown-haired girl, first of all, because Viserys said the first one is going to inherit no matter what.
That's true.
So the anti-women ruler people are going to be like, that's a woman that's going to inherit and then pass on to another woman. They're really not going to like that.
Too far.
Yeah.
And the wrong color hair.
Yeah, and the wrong color hair.
So I'd be so curious to see how Rhaenyra and Helena get along, how they've interacted as well.
Yeah,
a couple of things, because specifically, if you remember in episode 1, Rhaenyra says she wanted a sister, not a brother, and she would have named her Visenya. And so Rhaenyra has wanted a sister, and I imagine Rhaenyra wants a daughter too. And so, she's great, 3 boys.
You're right. Yeah,
any normal person would be like, "Oh, Rhaenyra has done she's done her duty. She's had 3 boys. What a great womb she has." But probably Rhaenyra is thinking, "Wish one of these was a girl."
Yep. So let's talk a little more about the curse and the fire. First of all, secret passages are implied to have been used at Harrenhal. We don't see it, but I'm guessing that he instructed them to he had to give them some knowledge of the castle, which he's from. He was born there and grew up there, so he would know. Lars, you'd think, would be able to do that pretty easily.
Yeah,
but we actually see Rhaenyra using secret passageways. And she comes upon Lionel chastising Harwin, which is what drives the point home for her that things are, the level of denial is not what she thought it was, which leads to Lionel trying to resign, but he can't admit to fully why. So Viserys really kind of calls his bluff. He's like, well, why? And we talked about this earlier, and it's almost comedic. It's like, I can't come out and say that these grandkids of mine, or that these kids are my grandkids, because awful things will happen to them and my sons. It's the same thing that Larys points out. He can't just come out and admit it, because it's dire consequences for his own family. Like, he has to go along with it. So it's almost comedic.
Interesting parallel to him and Otto, by the way. Otto angling to get his kids into the royal bloodline. Lionel trying to deny that his kids are in the royal bloodline.
Yeah.
I really feel for Lionel here, because he's just trying to not get caught in the storm, as it were. Like, there's this theme, this episode of, Rhaenyra saying that, the wise sailor flees the gathering storm. And that's what Lionel's trying to do. Lionel is very much trying to do that, and Viserys won't let him do it. But he still gets away for a little while, and that's his demise, ultimately.
Yeah. It's really interesting how this has shades of Otto's being compromised for a very similar reason, but Otto isn't the one who offers his resignation. He doesn't recognize his own level of being compromised. He's like, I'll just keep going, But Lionel's like, look, I can't serve you the way I did before. I'm compromised. And so it's a flip, a bit of a mirror image of that situation. But Lionel just has to concede. He's like, well, I can't admit the whole truth, so I guess I'll just have to keep the job. But he's like, well, let me take my son home. At least let me get rid of this powder keg, which maybe is the wrong or the perfect metaphor, given he burns to death. I feel like
Lionel there, he really was thinking, I need to resign so that I don't lose my head over this.
Yeah, and his son too. He's worried about that.
He's thinking about that, only to send himself to Harrenhal, where he's open to be murdered more easily.
Careful what you wish for, yet again. Like, well, let me have this. At least let me go die, is really kind of what that amounted to. Through no fault of his own, obviously. He couldn't have possibly seen that coming.
I want to give Lionel maybe a little more credit. Not that he isn't maybe worried about being killed or his son, but I think he's worried about the realm. I think he's legitimately trying to remove this element that might light the powder keg. Does that make sense? Like, his son's presence is pushing this issue. It's putting it in everyone's face constantly, and he wants to put an end to that. And I think for the good of the realm.
And I think this is where you get some Ned vibes. And that we have a question here from JDS Third, sends a super chat, says, we love Ned for his honor, not wanting bastards on the throne, but now we hate Alicent for the same thing. Rhaenyra did not fulfill the wish of her father. Unite the Valyrian Targaryen lines. Team Green all the way. Okay, well, a couple comments on that first, and then we'll just describe how it applies here. Team Green all the way. Well, the problem is Team Green is going to commit the same sin of not just letting things lie and doing the thing that causes the least conflict. Yes, I can kind of agree that if Ned had just allowed the Lannisters to get away with it, it would have saved a lot of lives. And maybe that's better. Maybe peace is worth that dishonor. Ned is inflexible in his honor, to be fair. Like, as much as we like the guy, that's a fair estimation of him. And I think Lionel is expressing the same thing here. He's like, what you need right now is someone that's willing to lie to make things work, because you need lies. We're all living on a lie here, and we need someone who can manage that well, someone who's comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not a liar. So it's a little bit of inflexible. The same thing that made him a good advisor makes him not good for this situation. Same with Ned. He's not good at Ned wasn't good at managing the natural, inherent, constant dishonesty of court, right? It's not something he worked well with. Oil and water, right? He just couldn't do it. Couldn't make himself that dishonest. Couldn't stoop to that level is one way you could phrase it. But I don't think the Greens really have that either. I don't know that the Blacks will in the long term either. So, but, Sean, go ahead.
I wanted to say something about the idea of Greens versus Blacks, which I again remind everyone I'm kind of unsullied. I have some superficial awareness. Like I knew there was this Green versus Black conflict, but I didn't know what it meant or what the sides were. It's becoming more clear. But something I realized even last week, I think I was kind of like siding with the Greens. I felt like Shay kind of asked me directly, what do you think about Harwin? What do you think about Kristan? And I was kind of lining up with the Greens. But I should have realized this more quickly. Everyone on the Greens or the Blacks don't have the same agenda and the same morality. They're not a monolith. Like even within them, there's going to be people who disagree or have more sinister motives or are more or less cruel or fair-minded or whatever it is. So I feel myself not so certain about being lined up with the Greens now, but I realize it's really that Harwin has become more clearly sinister. I still
Harwin,
tend
you mean
line up
Larys.
Larry, sorry, I might have
like,
spoke a second ago when I said Harwin, but you asked me about Larry's last week, and I thought he was, but I still tend to find myself lining up with Alicent. I don't necessarily agree with everything she's doing, but I don't think she's being evil. I think she's like making errors of judgment, but not being an evil person. Does that make sense? Where Harwin, I think, is being an evil person. Larry's. How many times am I going to mix that up? Also, I wanted to point out that, what an awful villain Larys seems to be, turning on his own family and burning people alive. I hope no one else does.
Yeah. I've never seen any other murders of family members in this timeline. I think there's a bit of a Garden of Eden vibe here going on where she invited him in, invited his trust, even with the garden. It's literally a garden, the hibiscus flowers, and then she doesn't realize what he is. She doesn't realize how bad he is, how evil he is. And now that he's in, she may not be able to let go because she's desperate for allies and is desperate for anything that will help. She's like, I have no allies in King's Landing. Won't anyone help me? And so she's got this powerful person on her side, and is probably scared of him not being on her side now. She's like, well, what if he's not on my team, then he's against me, and I really don't want that. So now she's kind of like, damned if she does, damned if she does. She just kind of has to make use of him, and it's scary.
She might also be subject to blackmail. I think that was a tacit threat that he was making.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When he was like, I just did what the queen asked me for. Like when she kind of realized he killed his own family, she was on the cusp of threatening to expose him for that.
Yes.
And his response is like, you told me to do it.
And
go ahead, make a public announcement.
And she gave him the intel. Remember, he's like, when they start having dinner, he's like, I find myself in the reverse. Usually I'm the one telling you secrets, but you're the one with the extra information. So she spills the beans on what happened that led his father's going to go home. So she gave him that info that he then used to murder them.
That could be part of his, I don't know, potential blackmail. Like he could tell people that information. How else would I know that? Alicent told me. You know what else she told me? To kill.
She's so skilled with lies. She's probably terrified of just how he would. She's like, she knows he's so competent at this. It's like, oh, I don't want to. I cannot see this. I cannot have this man as my enemy. Like that's scary as hell.
She's kind of realizing who she's gotten in bed with now, and it's kind of a scary thing to realize. And it's part of why I wanted to pick Olivia Cook when we were talking earlier about
she's really good
because she had some great moments.
Yeah, that
whole episode.
Her realizing what she's got. Yeah, her like visible discomfort and her shaking is like, wow. Yeah, that was great acting. Because you're right, it pushes back on her being a bad person severely. That she definitely didn't want this. There's no doubt she didn't want this. There's no one else around for her to be acting for. It's a pure reaction.
And and it's funny because I do still see people blaming Alicent for Harwin and Lionel dying, and I see it in the chat right now, even now, and I really disagree. I don't think Alicent asked for this or wanted this or would ever in any world would she have signed off on this if Larys had asked her to do this.
It's very much.
I think she was.
Go ahead.
I think she was genuine when she told Kristan, and she wants to believe. She has to believe. She said the decency and honor will prevail.
It's her decency and honor,
family
her
is not
version
decency
of it.
and honor.
Yeah.
Like, to be clear.
Right, but her version on it would not include.
Her version doesn't include murdering. Yeah, kinslaying especially. Like, that's a particularly
it's even
dark
worse.
sin.
You're right. It's even worse.
And like that's why we know she didn't ask for it. Like, otherwise we're to believe that Alicent was asking Larys to kill his own family. Like, is that she wasn't asking that? She wasn't hinting. Like, could you maybe kill your own family for me? Like, no, she wasn't saying that. That's kind of silly when you put it that way.
He's doing way because he now stands to gain Harrenhal.
Yeah,
right?
He is the Lord Harrenhal
suddenly
now.
in a great position of power.
Yes, he's asking her for a reward, but he already got a pretty substantial one.
By the way, some Littlefinger vibes. Right?
Yes.
And
speaking of, well, let's come back to that in actually a second. Another comment from JDS Third here says the king wanted his legacy to join houses Targaryen and Valyrian, not Targaryen and Strong. I love George R. Martin. Great story. Well, I totally agree with I love George R. Martin. Great story. Yeah, and you're right. The king did want that, but the king also seems to have accepted what's happening. He's like, yeah, it's maybe not what I wanted, but this is fine. It's better than war.
Really, what he wanted was for Corlys to be placated.
That too.
Most importantly, and if Corlys is placated, well, then the mission is complete. Really,
he wants the second age of dragons, and these kids have dragons, so that's still happening.
Yeah.
And he said perception matters, not truth, and that's just as true in this whole scenario. It's like, look, Alicent, if we all just pretend like these are the right kids, then they're the right kids. Like that, the truth of this doesn't matter. There's only a few of us that know, and exposing that is way worse for the realm than just playing the game. If your goal is for everyone to know the truth about everything, I mean, I guess. But if your goal is for people to not die in war, I think one is more valuable than the other.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sean. Like it comes down again down to like what your honor is versus my honor and all that. And I think the most important honor is avoiding bloodshed in the realm, even if that means you have to swallow your pride and pretend that these boys are legitimate.
Yeah, there isn't some universal code of honor. There's it's a personal
and
thing.
It might even be different if when war broke out, Alicent and Viserys and Daemon and all these wealthy people living in castles fought each other to the death. But is that going to happen? Or are average people in their homes who have no knowledge of this, they're the ones that are going to suffer? And I don't know what kind of honor is okay with that.
Yeah. Well
Maybe
said.
there is one, but it's not mine.
Well point indeed. A little more on Larys here. Of course, we hinted at Larys Varys last time. It seems even clearer now with cutting people's tongues out and stuff. That's little birds versus big bugs. These are fireflies. That's what he has on his cane there. If you may not have noticed that little firefly.
Yeah, there's a picture of it here. This is how we know is that on the HBO Guide site they have a little featurette where they wrote about his golden firefly and his staff and his cane, and you also see that symbol on the
operatives.
On the operatives, on the cloaks of the operatives.
His little bugs or his big bugs. Yeah.
Pulling up here.
So he cleverly says, like people are so superstitious, they'll just blame it on the curse. It'll be really easy for him to get away with it. And he's probably right about that. Fireflies symbolically, they're symbols of the night. They're creatures of the night because they illuminate it, right? They you can't really see their light very well during daylight. They're also symbols of romance. Go ahead.
I thought that maybe he was butting up to the high towers. They light the way.
And fireflies' lights are green. Yeah. That is the general tint there. Fireflies are symbols of creation through destruction, which we certainly get that, sort of. There's certainly destruction. We'll see about the creation part. And they're symbols of romance. I don't know. Are we bringing up Littlefinger? And is Larys, does he into Alicent? Does anyone get that vibe with the flowers and I don't know. He doesn't have a wife or anything?
I personally do get that vibe, and I can say that I know that there are people out there who are shipping Larysent. For how messed up it all is.
Yikes. Yeah.
I mean, the way, when he picks up a flower and caresses it and looks at her,
and says he expects she'll return the favor.
Yeah, they're metaphorically in bed, if not, but not.
And in the behind the sscenes bit, they said that she was his muse, also. So
yeah. So
no, they said that about Kristen.
Okay. Never mind. But I don't know. I get the vibe that yeah, he is into her. I don't get the vibe that she would ever willingly sleep with him or anyone or a cheat, period.
It's a one-way street, I think. Yeah, I don't think she's reciprocating.
But Viserys is expected to die, like Harwin
she'll take a lover
afterwards. That's a good point. That like if Viserys dies, Alicent remarrying, that is just that is generally expected of a widow or a widower to get remarried. So interesting point, Sean.
Yeah.
And the Lord of Harrenhal, he's no joke.
Yeah, you are right that he is prestigious enough that it wouldn't be weird for her to marry the Lord of Harrenhal.
And that's where the Littlefinger vibes get huge, because Littlefinger had to become Lord of Harrenhal before he asked for Sansa, and which he didn't get, but he needed to be that, and he wanted to be Lord of the Riverlands to be over Catelyn as well. And Alicent happens to have red hair, so there's a lot of these same vibes here. But I think shout out to poor Quentin Emmett Booth from Nauticast. He mentioned that there's a lot of Qyburn here from him as well, the way he just sidles up to the queen and makes himself very useful by doing some very dark things. Now, Cersei is more approving of dark things, of course. She's already more predisposed to accept cruelty and brutality. She's like, yeah, that's fine, no big deal. But still, it's a similar way. He became valuable in a similar way by just showing up and doing things that were useful and becoming invaluable. And all of a sudden, Cersei's like, well, I really kind of need you now. Like, I would find it difficult to get around without you. And also just the cruelty and amorality of these characters and the prisoners being used for things and all this stuff. Dro the Gooner says, Larry's got his lordship and Targaryen princess, Helena. Oh, Helena.
They both have bugs in common. He likes fireflies. Right. She collects bugs.
Yeah, we got two bug
definitely,
people.
When we were trying to identify what the bug was in Lares' staff, many people were like, call in Helena. We need an entomologist.
Nice. So I think this is the ultimate careful what you wish for example, what happens between Larys and Alicent, and Ido did what the queen wished for. It's like careful what you wish for, because there might be some evil genie about listening and granting that wish, right? It's also very similar to Henry II of England, who was the son of Empress Matilda from Anarchy fame, the very war that the Dance of the Dragons is based on. He kind of emerged from the chaos of the war to become king shortly after it was settled, and he had his friend, Thomas Becket. They were good pals. They worked together. Thomas had a lot to do with helping King Henry establish himself. And eventually he rewarded Thomas by making him Archbishop of Canterbury. But Thomas Becket went all zealous on him and was not a political ally. He was no longer rather than being someone in a position of power that could continue to help the king from this lofty religious position, he started working against him, because he's like, no, I'm following the rules of the church, and I'm doing, and that means going against you because these rules conflict. And eventually he said that. He's like, well, someone rid me of this turbulent priest. And he just said it idly. But 4 of his knights just went out and did it. They killed him, like the archbishop. Like, that's obviously a huge deal. Those guys got excommunicated. And yes, it wasn't sneaky like Larys. Yeah. They had to go to the Holy Land on crusade for 14 years to make up for it. So they had to go kill more people to make up for it. Yeah. So, anyway, so I think that's...
Good job turning the other cheek.
I think this is a strong parallel, if not a direct inspiration, especially because it comes out of the Anarchy itself, which was obviously the inspiration for all this. So, yeah. Another parallel, I suppose, we talked about Doran Martell earlier as a parallel to Viserys, but we also have Doran, or rather Oberyn's parallel that he's lays out, which is that he's the snake and Doran is the grass that allows him to be hidden. Or wait, was that no, Doran himself said that. He's like, yeah, my brother's the snake, but I'm the grass that hides him before he strikes. Yeah, it was Doran who said that. And that is kind of a similar relationship that Viserys and Daemon could have had under different circumstances. They have those qualities. They aren't necessarily used that way. So in this case, it's the snake in the grass or the firefly in the hibiscus. And yeah, so that's that. Any other thoughts on Alicent and Larys before we move on?
Not that I can think of right now.
I just want to say again to people, yes, it is confirmed that it is a firefly, not a bee.
Yeah, we went all this bee talk last night on Twitter. Bee fits so well, like pollinating and queen bee.
Framing the beesberries.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
I thought that's what was happening.
There's a lot of good theories there, but absolutely the website just straight up confirms golden firefly, so at the end of that.
We'd be wrong about it being a bee,
Yeah, Aziz had written all these like great bee lines for our synopsis, and I was like, cut that.
I had to cut it all. You had to change it to Firefly, which Firefly worked pretty well too, but it wasn't as we birds and the bees with all the children, and explaining like why the kids don't look right and all that. I was like, oh, that fits so well with the theme.
Varys' little birds and Laris' little bees. We were really loving the idea of it being bees. I was like, I would have liked that, but no. Firefly, which also makes me wonder, I'm like, did Laris decide to set this fire well beforehand?
Yeah.
Like, had he
he had these.
It's very on the nose.
These Firefly
for him to
things
have a Firefly emblem ready before his nefarious plan that involves lighting his family on fire.
He had 10 years to think about. He's like, yeah, eventually they're going to go back there and I'm going to burn them. Just waiting for that day to come. Let's talk about Pentos a little more. So Vhagar and Caraxes doing like an air show there. That was pretty fun.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, just doing like dancing about and as you said before, Daemon would be very used to Vhagar given that it was his dad's dragon.
Yeah.
And Caraxes was his uncle's dragon, by the way, while we're at it. So, yeah. Rhaenys, the queen who never was, her father had Caraxes. So, yeah. And Daemon and Viserys' mother had the dragon that Rhaenys, the queen who never was, rides now. So all these dragons just end up, it's just hard to keep track of, but you can always ask us. We know who the dragons are ridden by. And so we talked about this on the preview episode. Vhagar is just like covered in ropes, which we assume or figured out is because like the dragon is so huge, you need to like things to hold on to when you're climbing around this giant monstrous animal, right? Like you gotta have something to hold on to. So it's just like this mass of ropes.
I'm
like
still
a
laughing
nest.
at the idea of like Lena tethering like her groceries or her, her belongings to the ropes, and then they're just like all hanging there. That's how they did not sail from Driftmark to Pentos. They all just like flew in her like she's like a soccer mom with like a big SUV.
Huge SUV. She could have like a bunch of heads tied to those ropes. Like if she were to go, because she wants to be a dragon. She wanted to be a dragon rider going into battle. So that's what she would. That's alternate reality. Lena has the foes of her, the heads of her defeated enemies tied to all those ropes by their hair, just flying through the air, heads dangling behind her. That would be badass. I want to see that. That needs to be done. We need a dragon rider that did that.
That really would be a very good use of dragons, is like airborne troops, if you will, like inserting them like air assault, like helicopters that can fly in and drop off a squad, pinpoint the spot,
you clear the landing spot with fire, like get out of the way, give them a spot to land.
I showed this earlier in the stream, but I'll highlight it again. This is from the House the Dragons built behind the scenes. It's the 3D modeling for Vhagar, where you really see that like that neck of hers, but you can see the comparison that they clearly took inspiration from ancient tortoises, because what other creatures live a very long time? Well, another very similar reptilian type, like dragons already have that tortoise vibe. So I hadn't pinpointed that they took that inspiration for Vhagar, but it's so clear in retrospect.
And here's where we remind people that the dragon roars, at least from the original Game of Thrones, were based on turtle sex noises. If don't I have that right? Yeah, that's what they built the sounds from. The roaring, it started as that. They just tweaked it and changed it and modified it. Okay, so what else here? Baela and Rhaena, we talked about them a bit already. Lena, we talked about as well. There's one line that we didn't address. She says maybe she's not what he wanted in a wife. What did y'all make of that? Like, was she alluding to the fact that he wanted Rhaenyra, or that's who he really had his sights set on, and she felt like the second fiddle to that, but was okay with it?
Yeah, that is what I took. That like they have that Daemon and Lena have a good relationship, a fine relationship, but it's been 10 or 8 years or whatever. It's been a number of years, and there's some strain in their relationship. And Daemon more than his wife is not happy with his lot in life, and that comes with, if he had married Rhaenyra, he would be the future king consort, that comes with it. So whether Lena thinks that Daemon is hung up on Rhaenyra in particular, I don't know, but I think Lena for sure thinks Daemon is hung up on wanting to be the future king, and Rhaenyra is part of that.
Okay, yeah,
is my read. But I do think that Lena and Damon care about each other, and that comes through even with this. I don't know if you agree.
I
agree. Some people
yeah.
feel that in the book that Damon and Lena had a more loving relationship, but I think you just don't see the strain. You don't see the harder moments in Fire and Blood, because why would you? You wouldn't see these.
They lived in Pentos.
You wouldn't see the times that they argued, but
they wouldn't be documented very well.
Yeah, it was like their conversation was a pretty normal one to me for a decade-long relationship to have that kind of argument. It didn't seem like they're completely estranged.
No, not at all. It seemed like, they seemed still like they had plenty of love between them. Maybe the passion was gone, but they were committed to each other and things like that. Yeah, I think standard things that happen with couples in a very non-standard scenario and environment.
Yeah.
The Prince of Pentos wants dragon riders to deter the triarchy. That's a big thing. That's one of the things they disagree on. Like what?
Regio Heratus. And notable because there is a Pentashi in Fire and Blood that writes a tale about Pentos, a different era, a Heratus. So he's from a very long-running noble family.
Yeah, and of course there's some vibes of, like you said before, of Dany and Viserys being entertained by Illyrio and living in Pentos and just being someone's guest and what that all means.
Yeah.
Sean, you have something to add?
Yeah, I thought that they, the moment at the dinner table when she pulls her hand away from Daemon, I think that was meant to be, one, the look on her face was a little surprised. She's like, we're not on the same page here. And it was like maybe a little sad when she pulled her hand, which for that to be the case, they have to have been in accord and loving leading up to that moment, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Oh, what happened there?
Dancing enjoying.
Yeah, that was exactly. There we go. You're back. That was
hello?
You
okay.
are here. That was fine.
Yeah, I think that I don't think that scene was showing us that they don't love each other. I think that scene was showing us is that they've
hit a roadblock,
a moment of uncertainty.
Yeah, there's a fork in the road here. And also, again, I wonder how long have they been overseas in Essos? Has this been a year? Has this been 3 years? Like, obviously Lena is pregnant, so it has to have been longer than her pregnancy. Like, I don't think she got pregnant and they said, "Hey, let's go travel now." You know?
Yeah.
So like, I would guess they've been overseas for at least a year, but it's unclear. But also in terms of brought up in the chat, Urias Tosh points out he got her pregnant less than a year prior, so they can't have been too estranged.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is a good point.
Although it's not like, I mean, I think it's fair to call Alicent and Viserys estranged, and they're still having kids. So
they haven't had a kid, and hasn't been pregnant in a while. Her youngest child is maybe Aemond is 9 or 8, like 10. How old is he? I don't know how old he is. Yeah. It's unclear, but either way, she hasn't been pregnant lately.
Yeah, it's been a little while.
I will say it was a little frustrating when Lena was, I don't know, making her case. It's saying like, this is what I want from life. And Damon's like,
yeah, okay.
You're still here?
Yeah,
okay.
That was kind of rude.
I was like, oh, geez, man.
But I think very relatable. Like, who hasn't had their wife tell them that they want to go back and claim their birthright in the land of their birth, But no,
we're all
Valyrians
here.
Relatable in that you have to make a conscious decision to have that sort of conversation sometimes. And that isn't where his headspace was necessarily there. That doesn't mean that Daemon always is going to be that checked out, but it does imply to me that he has been that checked out for the last number of months, that he has been lost in his thoughts.
Drinking a lot.
And distant. And I think a lot of people have experience that in their own relationships and maybe move past it or maybe not. But there are times where you're like, oh, my partner is depressed or my partner is has gotten laid off of work or something like that.
Yeah.
And like things are they're not themselves and they don't really want to even try. Like they don't even want to try to go investigate Pentos or they're just going through the motions.
Yeah, that does seem like what he's like. And I think that's part of what we get with the malaise of, well, his life didn't work out the way he wanted it to. He's not married to Rhaenyra. He's not in line for the throne. And I think that is maybe parallels Viserys still carrying a torch for Emma, where we're seeing both of them unhappy at the same time. And then that just becomes even more of a parallel when Lena dies, not quite in childbirth. She's about to die in childbirth and then takes her own route out. It's a bit of the careful what you wish for thing where she said she wanted to die like a dragon rider. She didn't want it to be so soon and not, under much different circumstances.
One of my favorite lines in the episode was Daemon responding to Lena when he goes, "I didn't realize I was being so minutely observed."
Yeah. Yeah, right.
I was just like, how could people say House of the Dragon isn't funny when you've got lines like that, which just like perfectly encapsulate a long-term relationship where like, yeah, I would definitely, I might reply something like that if my partner said that to me as well. Like, geez, I didn't realize you were just like clocking everything I did.
Which on one hand it's really a distractionary comment, right?
Yeah.
He is making some mistakes, and how could she not observe them? But you frame it like you're spying on me or something, but you're really kind of deflecting the real issue.
And really, Lena is she's being a good, caring wife
she's
and
being observant.
partner.
Yeah.
She's observing and being like, I'm reaching out to you because I'm concerned. You seem to be considering a thing that I don't think is really what's gonna make you happy, and it's sure not gonna make me happy, so I should say something now.
Yeah, well said. So and I think on Viserys' side, because some of these moments are interspersed, he's maybe thinking about how if Emma was still around, if he hadn't done what he did, or if she were, or just in general, if she was still alive, none of these troubles would be happening.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have this succession crisis. He wouldn't have be married to someone who doesn't love him. Their relationship seems to have deteriorated. He wouldn't have all this conflict around his hand and all that other stuff. Yeah, just so many things would be different and probably better if he still had her.
I see people giving Daemon props for not cutting Lena open, but we don't actually. He never has to make the decision.
Yeah, he doesn't.
Like he doesn't make the
get
decision.
A chance.
I really don't think people should give him props for this at all. He just didn't decide.
Exactly. Before he's offered the choice, he's presented the scenario, and Lena notices. I think that's also lost in the shuffle. She sees them talking. She sees them whispering and realizes there's only one thing they could be talking about. They're talking about how I'm dying. She might have
even heard the word knife.
That's true. You're right. Either way, she figured it out, and she's like, "All right, I'm going out on my own terms."
By the way, I want to take this moment to point out something that Eliana of Girls Gone Canon, I saw her tweet about, pointed out that Rhaenyra's birth, no maester, just midwives. Rhaenyra did not have a maester involved for her birth there. It was just her and the midwives.
Interesting.
That
is a good point.
I thought that was really interesting because, of course, Rhaenyra might not take kindly to the idea of them involved.
Well, on the other hand, she might. I wonder why she wouldn't be okay with Orwell, given how good a job he was doing with her father.
She might be okay with him still, but not in the childbed. Not when they're willing to cut her open to save a baby. She has to. Even though I also have to wonder. We never know exactly what Rhaenyra knows about what went down with Emma in the childbed. We don't know what she was told about what happened, whether Viserys made that choice, what her suspicions are.
She might not know enough to distinguish Melos and what's the new guy's name? Orwell. She might not. She might just think maesters. She might not know them as different people.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Either way, it's a good observation by Eliana and worthy of perhaps further thought. What's that, Charlie?
I don't want to belabor it too much, but I felt like I don't know. Maybe Daemon. I think if Daemon had told that, I don't know if that was a maester. Did they have maesters?
It was a surgeon, technically, a surgeon, a Pentoshi surgeon.
Do you think if Daemon had told him, cut her open and get the baby out, he would have refused it?
No, he offered it. He offered.
He asked him.
He asked if you want that.
I bring that up because I feel like that means that Daemon is making the decision to not do that.
No, he didn't have a chance to. Yeah. Before he could answer, Lena saw them and got up. And before he's like, oh, she's gone. Before he's thinking about it, she's already stood up and walked out.
For all we know, Daemon would have said no. Daemon might have just walked off and not been able to make any answer himself.
He does do that a lot.
He just walk off. He might have gone to Lena and said, what do you want to do?
Yeah, we have no idea.
We just
don't
know. We cannot possibly give Daemon any props, in my opinion, for this. But criticism for this either. But I've seen like really popular tweets that are like really complimenting Daemon for doing this, but I think that's a huge misread.
I think that's the whole point, is that it wasn't his choice. Like, that's an important framing for the scene. It was her choice, which is, she went out on her terms. I mean, she didn't really have a whole lot of choice, but she still got to make the decision. And we barely got to know her. It is too bad. Yeah, it is a casualty of the 10-year gap. One of the characters that we maybe could have gotten to know more that we didn't. But it's interesting to see how news is going to travel. Now, if people in different locations, they're no longer in the Red Keep. The Red Keep learns about Harwin's death first. Rhaenyra is going to be one of the last to hear about it because she's isolated herself in Dragonstone. But she is going to hear about Lena before the rest of the realm, most likely, because they're much closer in proximity to Pentos than just about anyone else in the realm. Looking at the map makes that pretty clear. So that will have ripple effects. Positioning, timing of getting certain news before other people, someone like Larry Strong, any other person that understands the flow of information can use that, or maybe will use that. We'll see. Presumably Melos is dead, like we said, and Lionel, of course, is as well. Those characters were a little more well-known.
Can I cut in real quick?
Of course.
And just say, people are pointing out that their interpretation is that Daemon was shaking his head no. Oh. But my interpretation was that he was shaking his head no, as in like, oh, I have to make this decision. That wasn't an actual like concrete decision. Just to cut in to reply to that idea that maybe I can say that some people can interpret it as him actually saying no. I still don't consider that counting. Considering he shakes, he's like, I'm not sure, and then he looks over and Lena's just gone.
It seems like you could interpret it that way, but they did not make it clear.
Yeah, to me at least. To call him some feminist icon for that. No, people are mainly. There's a bit of a meme, a joke going around on Twitter where people are calling Daemon a feminist icon, kind of tongue in cheek. Like they're just kind of having fun with it, but sometimes people take it a little seriously.
Right on.
He is not.
Okay, folks, we're starting to wrap it up. We've got a few last comments, but if you have any questions you want to get in, now is the time, because we're calling it quits pretty shortly here. A couple of random things here. As I said before, we don't know if that was Sir Eric or Sir Eric behind Rhaenyra. It should be, I just forget which one it is, but there was one of them was assigned to be her personal protector in Fire and Blood, so it's probably that one. Grover Tully is mentioned in all that stuff about the Riverlands, so it clears up one question we had, whether they would keep those Muppet Tully names
they mentioned
or not.
Grover Tully and his son. They don't say his son's name, but in canon, his son's name is Elmo Tully, and there's also a Kermit Tully and an Oscar Tully.
Yeah, so I thought they were going to change those names, and then people pointed out that HBO is owned by the same company that owns Sesame Street, so they can go ahead and use those names. Yeah.
Maybe not all in one scene, because it makes it really clear. I mean, as soon as they say the name Elmo, people are gonna... I have to say a really funny thing. I used the hashtag Muppet Tullys when I tweeted about Lord Grover Tully. So I clicked on the hashtag Muppet Tullys to see who else tweeted with that hashtag. You know who tweeted that? In 2015 was me. Two people have tweeted using the hashtag Muppet Tullys, and it was me in 2015 and me in 2022, which is really weird to me. But
the 7-year
same
Muppets.
Brain. I do love the concept, and I've said it before, but we've got our friend Chuck, who's a listener of the podcast, who's got a great cosplay of Elmo in like a full-sized Elmo that a man can wear that is dressed in Tully clothing, and he's also got a full-size Kermit, and he is going to bring them to Ice and Fire Con, I guess this next year, so that'll be glorious. That's very, very amusing. I wish I could share a picture, but I think he's keeping it on the DL.
All right. There was a mention of, during the talk of the Stepstones, of a giant Tyrashi general with purple beard who wears women's clothes. That This is Ricalio Rindoon. We have talked about him before, and we'll talk about him more later. I'm very glad to see him name-checked. Well, not name-checked, mentioned indirectly by description, because he's a cool character.
I'm so
curious. We were really hoping he would be included, so maybe he'll be cast next season.
Yeah, I'm super curious how they'll go with that, because that's with a modern perspective, it's like that's a balancing act of a character to portray.
Oh, yeah.
Like, their gender fluidity and queerness, there's a few ways they can go with it, because they're not going to put it in modern terms exactly, but I think it will be more complex than this is a guy who cross-dresses weird. Like, I think it will be like this is part of them, and I'm choosing to use non-binary pronouns for Ricalio Rindoon until I know otherwise, just because with Fire and Blood we don't know, but it's very interesting to me that this person chooses to dress in women's clothing, but also keep a beard. They clearly are embracing gender fluidity within this pseudo-medieval type world, which, within the constraints of that. So I'm curious how this will go, for sure, and something we thought could have been cut.
The character is full of contradictions.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. It's not just that. Like, he hates... loves kittens but hates cats, for example. Yeah, there's all sorts of strange aspects to this guy. He's a fascinating character, so we hope that he's got a solid role. We'll talk about him more later.
And they did call him Giant, so that they kind of also hemmed themselves in with who they're going to cast for a future season. Now, that'll definitely be an exciting casting, I'm sure. And in the in between times, we'll get someone cast and be like, it's them.
Yeah, that's really true. Russell Robinson says, have they talked about King Viserys only having one arm now? He only has one arm now?
It seems like he's got like a blanket over it. That is my impression as well. I can
completely miss that.
That it's not shown very clearly, but that was the impression.
Partly arm, like he's got like a stump?
Like a stump. Yeah, it's not fully gone, but I'm trying to see if I can pull up a good picture for you. It's always hard for me to pull up.
In the meantime, Dan Windsor sends a super chat and says, loving the Hot D coverage. Shea, thanks for the What We Do in the Shadows recommendation. It is great. It is indeed.
That's me always talking about What We Do in the Shadows. I was just rewatching it recently, so that's great to hear.
Yeah, it is a really fun
Whenever
show.
I think about someone having wishes that backfire, I now think of Nandor the Relentless.
Nice. Careful what you wish for. That's a great call.
See there? You can't
fits the theme.
see that there. I'm trying to see.
Yeah, that
doesn't show it. No, I'm trying to find a better shot.
Let's just move on. We can look for that another time. We don't need to do that right now.
Oh, no, I can be looking for it while you are talking is my point, and we'll bring it back up.
Okay, so Sean, what's that?
Yeah, I did have one, talking point. I thought that I was a little frustrated. I feel like Laenor is a little too excited to go to war for multiple reasons. One, I think it's...
he sees it as an adventure. I think it's part of his privilege,
Exactly, right. And he's in a lot less danger in war than the soldiers would be, right?
He's a dragon rider.
Dragging in the air, slaughtering people. He's much less likely to get killed. Never mind, he's not seeing that, he's kind of abandoning his family, his post, if you will, to do it. So I was kind of torn in his character. I thought it was interesting that he, in certain ways at least, was supporting his wife and playing his role. But Rhaenyra kind of called him out, like, look, you're just partying. You're not, now's the time to really play the role, and you want to run off to war. Like, even aside from her frustration with that, even if you wanted to run off to do some other thing, it would still be frustrating. But war is like the worst thing.
Yeah. And he's like, but she finally just commands him, right? And he's like,
yeah.
All right. He kind of is resigned. He's like, all right then. I guess you can tell me what to do. And she kind of gives him permission to bring his lover, so that helps a lot. He's like, all right, well, that helps a lot.
And also an indication that she recognizes that there is a storm brewing. She says, we need all the swords we can get.
Yep, that is true. That is very true. So, and it remains to be seen whether she's right that leaving is better than staying. Certainly, Laenor provides some of the logic that she herself espoused earlier as to why they needed to be there. Apparently, she thinks the pros outweigh the cons now, or the cons outweigh the pros, whichever way you want to look at it. Either way, she thinks Dragonstone is better. Probably the driving force, though, is her children. She says it's the rumors that are bothering her, but it's not just the rumors. It's not the talk. It's what it means. It's what it could lead to.
Yeah.
As Lionel said when he didn't know anyone else was listening, he said, this flimsy shield of the king's denial is the only thing keeping us all alive, basically. And Rhaenyra's like, yeah, you're right. It is kind of thin, isn't it? So
yeah, that was a good moment. I think her hearing that conversation was a wake up call for her. I also want to point out it's another little frustrating loss of synergy because they talked about Alicent pouring honey in the king's ear if Rhaenyra left.
God, if the bee thing again, the
bee thing, exactly.
Damn it! They should have used the bees. Five Fireflies was good, but did they consider bees? Dang, sorry, bees. I know you feel let down. The bees got buried.
I will. On the arm watch thing, none of the screenshots I have make it abundantly clear, but notable is that every screenshot I pulled up, you see one arm and the other one is just completely hidden under like a thing, which, but people say that in the scene when he's talking to Lionel that it's more clear.
What about when he's holding the baby? He holds Joffrey. I guess you don't have a screenshot of that because he has to, I guess he could just use his stump, and kind of hold the child.
Yeah, he might not be missing it at the shoulder. He might be missing it at the.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Elbow.
See, he's just using the same one arm.
Yeah, the blanket is covered. Yeah, you can't.
But there's specifically like when Alicent tucks Viserys into his blanket and the chair, she covers that arm completely. When he's holding the ring at the end, it's just every example is just like you never. There's not a single shot where you see the other arm out, and so it's unclear to me how where it cuts off exactly. But
we may get more clarification in the next episode.
On Saturday I'll have an actual shot of it because I'm sure I'll be able to find the actual shot. I thought out of all of these I have 150 some photos from the episode and yet none of them make it clear.
All right, folks, that is our episode. If you want to check out the synopsis, make sure to do that. It gives you a nice summary of the main topics that we discussed today. The Century of Blood was discussed in the episode, and we have an episode on that. The Stepstones as well. We've mentioned that several times. Always a good time to check out our Stepstones episode. There's episodes on the parentage of the Viserys and Daemon. We talk about some of their family in various Fire and Blood episodes. Our episode on Lys particularly comes back around today with that mention of Aegon and also the Century of Blood. All that stuff wrapped up together, as well as Recalio Rendoon appearing in some of those episodes. So a lot of this stuff, things we've touched on before. If you came live today, we appreciate your being here and adding to the discussion and adding to the fandom in your own way. Thank you for those of you who listen afterwards. You can always catch the live streams on replays on YouTube and Spotify, or the podcast versions audio only on Spotify or Google Play or iTunes or Amazon Music or any other place else you catch podcasts.
I will have a couple images that we did not reach that I would like to say real quick.
Go for it.
One is I never actually put on screen the close-up shot of Helena's box of bugs.
Are there any fireflies in there? I don't see one.
Yeah, no, there's like a butterfly, like a leaf insect and some beetles and a scorpion, and she's obviously got the millipede in her hands. I just wanted to take a moment to make sure I actually showed that on screen.
Nice.
But I also wanted to take a brief moment when I missed it when we were talking about the Pentashi Library. They made books. 2,000 books. Well, they made the spines, not the books themselves, for this library. And you can see here, we can read some of the names, like The Curious Mystery, or right here, The Histories of Essos, The Prince of Valyria, like The Power of Valyria, a bunch of different books, dragons. One book is about Tyria, as you see here, the librry. Anyways, there's a lot of cool books there, and I just wanted to
Tyria was part of Valyria, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mainly just wanted to
highlight
that.
Good call. Yeah.
Which is very, very cool. I would read any one of those books happily. And if you want to see more shots like that, I recommend checking out the house that Dragons built featurette. It's also got some cute little moments that I highlighted like this, which is Aemond and little Luke together say something memorable. And then Luke just looks a little actor.
He
This
just
is
looks
Harvey
at him
Sadler plays young Luke.
He's like,
and he just
I'm just
looks
going to
up at
stand
him.
here being cute and
Yeah,
stare.
I just like, well, these kids are cute.
Look at that. He looks like a cherub.
Yeah. There's also like the kids dancing, in the background of some scenes, like doing like dap dance. And they're really, really precious. And
kids are nice and all, but we need more cats. We need more cats.
Yeah, if you can get a cat, Sean, you have a chance still, perhaps.
Thanks as well to Michael Klarfeld for his video intro and the maps behind us. Thanks to Bran Winslow for our current awesome House of the Dragon video intro and the music that goes with it. Thanks as well to Joey Townsend and Jesse Koval for our regular History of Westeros music. Thanks as well if you've joined us on Patreon or as a subscriber through Spotify. Basically the same benefits through either. It's mostly about whichever is more convenient for you. You can support the show either way and get bonus episodes. Sean?
Yeah, I had one thought just popped in my head thinking about Helena and those bugs.
Yeah.
We've talked in the past about how there's something festering and infestation in the Red Keep and the family in the kingdom, like Viserys' sores and the rats. But Helena has control over these bugs. She's studying them. I wonder if there's some symbolism there. And also Harwin being, identifying with a bug. Maybe he's an infestation also.
You mean Larys?
Larys.
Man. You're stuck on that. See, he's gotten to you. He's taught you to say the wrong name to hide his tracks.
Varys, Sean. Larys is like Varys, just like associate him with Varys and have that as you had it before. It was literally this week that you started getting tripped up this episode.
The Fireflies got to you.
Oh wait, to be
really
on one last thing, to be on Kristen Cole and Larys Strong watch. Are you pro Kristen, pro Larys, anti Larys, anti what?
Gotta
be
anti Larys now.
I'm anti Larys now.
Okay, for sure. Yeah.
And I'm still on the fence about Kristen, but I see where they're turning him to the dark side.
I felt like you would not like that Kristen was how he taught those young boys. As someone who cares about that sort of thing generally, Sean, I thought that you would be very turned off by Kristen just kind of like being a really bad like Harwin's not wrong when he says he's teaching him cruelty and to be a bad
that wasn't knightly
fighter.
behavior.
Yeah, it wasn't. Maybe it's what'll win the fight. If Aegon gets into a fight, Aegon will win because he won't pull his punches there. But
his point about fairness in combat was true, but that's not an example of what that was.
Yeah, right. This isn't necessarily the right moment for that. That's not. He was using these kids as pawns. Not really trying to teach them. It is a good lesson to learn that it's not always fair, and sometimes you should be paired up against someone better than you. But that's not really what he was doing here. But not being a good teacher of kids is different from being a bad person or being a bad Kingsguard.
True.
But it is.
It's not the most damning thing, compared to in this world, especially.
But no, you have Kristen calling Rhaenyra the C word and generally seeming very sour.
Yeah.
But he does immediately recognize he shouldn't have done that and apologizes. He could be worse. It's
literal Kristen Cole
less
apologies.
Clearly a good guy than he was 2 episodes ago. I can find ways to justify him, but I'm sure they're going to make it tougher and tougher.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be true for a lot of characters. So you're not like that.
And that's the other thing I was going to say is that however bad he is, I'm not sure that he's that much worse than Laenor or Harwin.
Yeah, I agree with I actually do agree with you that I don't think that he's necessarily worse in some ways than Laenor, who has seemed kind of bloodthirsty is extreme, but itching
more
for a
callous
fight.
About it.
Yeah, and Laenor has seemed like. Yeah, I mean, you go through a war like that, you go to the Stepstones, you have to be kind of callous towards that sort of thing, or you're just going to have PTSD and be mixed up the rest of your life.
Some people come out of war determined to get peace, right? Mm-hmm. Determined to protect soldiers from being killed and determined to stop a war from happening.
He didn't learn that lesson either way.
Was his character.
Yeah, he just saw it as, it was fun. He liked it. I mean, which that also is a real word. Funny people like that.
On the Kristen Cole note.
Entertaining.
On the note of Kristen Cole, when I was rewatching episode 1 and 2 the other day, I noted that Rhaenyra, when she assigns Kristen to the Kingsguard, it's because he had faced combat experience, right? But what he says is that I raised 2 watchtowers, which that that's like the thuggish behavior. Like that's not an
Well, he was probably
honorable
ordered to
fight.
do that,
Like he was
but
ordered
still,
to do
yeah.
that. Yeah, like that was under Lord Dondarrion.
And there might have been some honorable fighting that led up to that, but
the way you
raising 2 watchtowers isn't too different from strafing down with your dragon to kill a bunch of people.
Exactly. I was like, really, when I watched back, I was like, Kristen's, I mean, I say thug because Fabian Frankel himself referred to Kristen Cole as a thug, which was very loaded language to me at the time that he said it. I didn't get thuggishness, I didn't get that from him, but I do now, especially in this training yard.
Someone who
scene.
resolves things through violence. Yeah, like he doesn't have other gears. He just like, well.
I had that thought too. Like Rhaenyra wanted someone to saw real combat. Okay, what do you think you were getting? You know?
It's not. Yeah, well, she doesn't know what that means. Yes, you do want someone that's seen real combat, but that shouldn't be the only qualification because you want someone that it hasn't like turned them into a bad person or made them. Or just otherwise compromise them,
or turn them into a broken person.
Or maybe they already were a bad person before that and made them worse. Who knows? Yeah. So like just experience alone is a kind of a neutral thing. It's you do want it, but by itself, it's not enough. Yeah.
She was basing it on something beyond just the fact that he had been in combat.
Also,
he's also hot.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. You also want hot people around you. Yeah. 101 for Kingsguard.
I think
no ugly Kingsguard.
Funny but true.
I think we've gotten to the root of the issue of why you're so apologetic for Kristen Cole.
Sean
you
loves
just
Kristen.
said he's hot. You said definitively you think he's hot.
Yep, Sean loves Kristen.
I do. Won't deny it.
Oh yeah, I agree too. Actually, he is a very pretty man, but
he might be the hottest of all the characters.
Nice.
I'm sorry. I will disagree. I think for me, actually, I think it goes Lena Velaryon and then Harwin Strong. And
Which
then
Lena?
I might say Kristen Cole third. I might call him maybe Alicent and Rainier. It's hard. It gets foggy. It gets muddy around there. But I think Lena Velaryon is the most beautiful woman in the realm.
Who's the hottest?
Let's objectify all these people.
Yeah. Okay, folks, we'll see a lot of y'all on Saturday for the spoiler stream and a lot of y'all on Monday for the next episode of our House of the Dragon spoiler-free coverage. Sean, do you have something else to say?
Follow me on Twitter, Dancing Sean.
At Dancing Sean.
Make sure you go join Direwolf City live probably right about now because we crossed over by a minute or so.
Yeah, and check out Radio Westeros tomorrow night. And we'll see you all next time. You know what to do. Valar rewatch us. Valar reread us.